Hello, hello. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues serious and silly, from the political to the cultural. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. And boy, do we have a show for you tonight, gang. We're going to be talking about kinks. We're going to be talking about kink shaming. And is it ever okay? Let me get up the tweet that kind of started this all. Credit to Allison for making me aware of this. But Planned Parenthood put out a tweet recently, last week, says this. Don't yuck someone else's yum. Everyone deserves the freedom to explore their own sexuality free of shame and stigma. And they had stopped kink shaming. There was a graphic with like whips and chains and handcuffs and things like that. There was a discourse about this. Someone quote tweeted it, which started a whole thread. Don't yuck someone else's yum is such a juvenile, sugar-coated way of saying don't shame people for strangling and beating their partners to get off. Just say what you really mean. It blew up. Planned Parenthood had to delete their tweet. It became a whole thing. But I wanted to explore this topic because it's interesting to me. When people do things consensually, right, within the bounds of their bedroom, is that ever wrong? And can that ever be wrong? And if it is, under what conditions? And we're going to talk about that today. We're still waiting on Katie. That's why I'm being a little extra monologue-y here. Hopefully she can get here soon. But I want to give everyone here a chance. And I first of all, I want to thank my guests for being here. You are going to be kink shamed by me, and you are going to be sexualized by me. I'm just letting you know out the gate, okay? Especially you, Corey. Especially you, okay?
That's the only reason why I'm here.
Beautiful. But I wanted to give you a chance to have intros, tell people who you are, and give your opening thoughts on this. And I want to start with the person who brought this to my attention. Allison, go ahead.
Okay. Some sexual proclivities, kinks, paraphilias, whatever you want to call them, are problematic, and the psychiatric community even recognizes this, and that's why there's a whole chapter of the DSM called paraphilic disorders. And I think that these can be separated into practices that are like objectively harmful to the self or others. So like extreme sadomasochism, there are people literally into things like knife play. I saw a stat on PubMed that said in America alone, every year between 250 and 1,000 people die of asphyxophilia, which is when you're basically jacking off with a noose around your neck and you accidentally hang yourself. Okay, so that's a problem. So yeah, objectively harmful to the self or others, but then also there's like sexual practices that are just so goddamn nasty that if you have like a single functioning discuss circuit in your mind, you would just be appalled. And I'm talking about things like age play, or otherwise known as autopedophilia, when a person likes to pretend to be a child. There are people who literally like to wear diapers and soil themselves. Like, okay, the idea that you have some right to just like, I mean, I'm not saying the government gets involved or whatever, but the idea that you have some right to just orgasm however you want without any social stigma whatsoever, I just don't believe in it.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing this topic to my attention, and we'll get into it. Katie is late, so we'll get to her last, but I want to give Corey a chance to have his opening statement and introductions. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me and inviting me. And also, you're looking real cute today, Wick. And also, apologies for sexually harassing you. I won't do that again. I also appreciate that I'm returning onto a panel that I can now break out my misogynist side, which I've been waiting a long time to do that. So looking forward to getting into that. But to actually answer the prompt as best I can is basically, so I think many people are conflating, something being unhealthy versus immoral, where something can be both, and I think there's a distinction to make there between using the example of, let's say, alcohol. I don't think there's anything immoral of consuming alcohol, but I would characterize it as unhealthy. And so I would put pretty much virtually all sexual kinks in that category. or rather they can be unhealthy, but I wouldn't. What goes on between two consenting adults? None of my business. And I'm pretty consistent on many previous panels before. I'm against shaming overall across the board. And so that's pretty much where I'll leave it for now.
Hey, thanks for being here. Really excited to have you sexually harass me throughout this panel. That is my kink, and please don't shame me for it. Next up, someone who hasn't been on in a while, but we're glad to have her back. My personal favorite, 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙.
Hey guys, I am 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. I am slightly in the middle here. I believe while most kinks should just be allowed to be, you feel free to have any kink that you want that's, healthy. But if you're going to name it in public, get ready to be shamed. There's just you can't stop people from shaming you, and doing that would stop them from having their own rights. So get ready to be kink shamed if you label your own kinks, especially on the internet. It's forever. You're never going to get rid of that.
What
So
a
if you like
pragmatic,
piss,
what a pragmatic take. Ginger, thank you for being here, and I'm excited, right? I'm excited to see where this goes. Next up, my other favorite, 𝕊𝖎𝖏. Go ahead.
Thanks for having me. It's really good to be here. I am, for the most part, a pro kink shamer. I used to be very anti kink shaming and very open and accepting of a lot of types. And I had an experience that I can get into later where I was essentially fetishized without my consent. And I think a lot of people publicly put their kinks out there because that's also a kink. And then other people are being roped into it without any consent whatsoever. I think kink shaming to a degree can be healthy and good for people. And as Ginger said, like if you put it out there to a certain degree, you got to expect you're going to get it back, right? I think there's a balance to be found there. I think that, sure, in the bedroom, if you want to do certain things and you're both consenting and actually enjoying it, fine. But I also think, for example, with BDSM, there's a lot of men out there who do it because they want to abuse women. And I also think that there's a lot of people out there who enjoy BDSM maybe because there's something else underlying. And I believe I used to be one of those people. So I don't like that anymore. I believe that there was a lot of issues that made me attracted to that weren't very healthy. So although some kinks may be healthy, I do think that there's a lot that just border on mental illness. So there you have it. That's
okay, bordering on mental illness coming out the gate strong. Well, we'll see how this goes. Also my favorite. Julie, go ahead.
Okay, I'm freaking out a little bit, so everyone's gonna have to bear with me. But I'm a kink shamer. I not 100% sure why. I kind of was excited to be here so I can ask questions and help figure out my own brain as to why I feel this way. I don't have an opening statement. I'm just panicking right now. Okay, great.
Hey, it's all good.
I love that.
Deep breaths. We'll treat you right. Don't worry. It'll be okay. You'll have fun. We'll have fun. My top favorite and my least favorite, all at the same time, juxtapositioned in this weird duality of Schrodinger's favorite. Katie, go ahead. And you got a cam for us, Katie? Okay, sweet.
oh my god.
So it seems that people want to have two different conversations. One conversation is about how, yes, if you do stuff online, people will joke at you for it. That's how the internet works. Less interested in that conversation. Since we can't shame people from shaming people online, that just doesn't work. If people want to make mean comments online, they're going to do that unless we make the online police, which I don't think we're planning to do that. I will raise you a cat.
That's surprising.
Okay. However, in terms of kinks being moral or non-moral, I think consent is really important, 𝕊𝖎𝖏. So I do agree that there's an element where people involve other people in their sexual pleasure without consent. So there's a reason why we don't like indecent exposure in public, because not everyone would be comfortable with that, and there needs to be a level of consent. from what I'm not sure what the tweet was. We'll get into it. But generally, I think that if 2 or more consenting adults consent to abuse each other, I don't have a problem with that. Not even a little bit. I'm full autonomy consent person. The only problem that I have is when people rope other people into their kinks without consent, which we can discuss. But yeah.
Okay, and speaking of consent, I'm glad you all consented to be here today. It should be an interesting discussion. Like I said, if you have trouble getting in, just raise your hand, right? Let me see it, and I'll try to get you in. But with that, I guess the floor is open. Consent. Oh, go ahead, Corey.
So yeah, I want to make let's say a distinction or make it clear. So like in my mind, at least in my circles, academic circles, like shame means something specific. So like on the pro kink shame side, we're actually talking about shame and like how do people understand shame? Because shame has, generally speaking, a pretty specific definition. Where on a previous panel, WhickTV panel, talking about, let's say, fat shaming, or when I talked about fat shaming, they say, oh yeah, we should like gently talk about or this person to lose weight, and it's like, well, that's not really shaming, and so it's like, how would you go about kink shaming if you are pro kink shaming?
And before you answer that, $5 from 𝕍𝖎 to say, is kink only limited to sexual acts? There are people who genuinely pay organizations to fake kidnap them and get a rush out of it. Is that shameful or harmful?
If the rush they get is sexual, then that's sexual.
It's
Depends
shameful.
what rush.
Yeah.
It's shameful. You should be ashamed of yourself if you're paying to get yourself kidnapped so you can have sexual gratification.
I agree.
I have no problem saying that at all. It's fucking shameful, and you should be ashamed of yourself. I'm sure you do.
But no, so yeah, Rora. Okay, if you were going to shame me for my kinks, how would you do it?
I would be very blunt and not very delicate about it. I think unless being kink shamed is your specific kink, then I do think that to a degree, if you're too gentle, it's not going to come across. And I think some level of kink shaming is healthy for people so they understand that people have boundaries. So I think that I don't know. I just don't think all the time it requires being like, for example, when he mentioned fat shaming and, towing the line and being more gentle about it, that's not necessarily fat shaming. I agree. Like if you're having a gentle conversation with someone and you're being very mindful of but I think some kinks, I'm sorry, but I can't at all explore that with you and why you have that and be like.
Well, the problem is that a lot of kinks, like you were saying, aren't consensual. There are a lot of kinks is like people who have a foot fetish that are getting off on you being in high heels for no reason. That's not consensual at all.
Is another one that you see all the time.
That's somebody's getting off on a part of your body without your consent.
My thing is, like, if you're doing that and you're getting off to pictures of like if my arm's raised and you see my armpit online, don't tell me about it. That's my major issue.
If you're going to tell me about it, I have every right to tell you to go fuck off.
Yeah, and you're a fucking weirdo. Leave me alone. Like if you're doing that in private and you're not putting that on someone else, like fair enough. It's harmless in that aspect, but I think a lot of kinks border on being harmful to other people simply by people discussing them. When I don't ask to hear about that, it's violating and it makes people super uncomfortable.
Okay.
Well, hold on, Corey.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that a lot of us women on the panel can agree, especially if you are streamers. We get messages in our DMs like, I'm jacking off to you right now type situation, or how does it make you feel to know I'm touching myself to you? Okay, well
I've gotten
you're
messages
very pretty, man.
like
It's all
that
right.
before.
So no, I'm just saying. So yeah, so it's like, to me, it's like, okay, why do I have to hear about that? Why is it necessary for you to tell me what you were doing? Why do I have to be involved in it?
So fuck you, Corey. My kink is to screw you over. Okay, like
That's my kink too. Bring it on.
Hey, consent reached. Awesome. Let's do this. So here's the thing. I don't think that what either of you described right now is what I talk about when I talk about kink shaming, right? So when we talk about a foot
but
fetish,
when other people are talking about kink shaming, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
can I respond
People
anyway?
weaponize kink,
No?
the term
Okay.
kink shaming to
Well, I
then
just want to make sure that we know that this isn't just
Well,
about Katie's feelings. This is about
I
the whole
understand,
panel's
but
feelings.
I will say,
What-
because Katie
what-
wasn't here for this.
What is happening
Just real
right
quick.
now?
Katie wasn't here for this, but Allison did name a couple kinks specifically that she thinks
Yeah.
should be shamed.
That's the only thing that that's the only reason why I'm doing. I forgot that you weren't here for the first part. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Allison, can you name those kinks again, so maybe we can just explore those and see if Katie and Corey and Ginger, Julie,
No,
the rest of us
I'm
think they're-
actually gonna finish my point. Actually.
Okay.
Funny story how that goes. Yeah. So the point that I'm making is that, Laura, I agree that people don't get to enforce their kinks onto you. And like, there's a difference between establishing one's boundaries and not being infringed upon sexually, and between like the concept of kink shaming generally. So just using Ginger's example, the concept of a foot fetish or like a foot kink, it's fine because you can do it consensually. However, someone getting off on my feet or asking to see my feet while I'm streaming, I wouldn't consider that. I would not shame them for their feet fetish. I would shame them for being a shitty person that is really inappropriate in my chat. You know, but I wouldn't call that. It's not, the feet are not the problem. The problem is that it's usually men who are incredibly entitled to women's bodies, and they feel comfortable just getting off on letting women know that that's what they're doing. Which, if that's a kink, I agree. That's a harmful kink because it relies on a non-consensual factor of that. So I agree with that.
Can I butt in and just say personally, I just think that a lot of the issue with kink shaming, at least some people are using, again, kink shaming as a way to almost weaponize their argument that they can do whatever the hell they want to people all the time. And I think it's commonly misused and abused. And I think I'm reading into Allison's tweet here a bit, but I think that maybe the issue is Planned Parenthood putting that out is almost enabling a lot more of that, right? So I think that's what the issue is here.
The idea that
Yeah.
people are obligated to like police their own response when actions that they would describe as like degrading or just like debased in general, I think is wrong. Like if some guy was like, I think it would be so hot if I could just like punch you in the face, like, oh, that would be so sexy. Like the idea that I have to be like, I politely decline. I wouldn't want to yuck someone else's yum. Like, fuck no. I'm going to freak out and I'm going to feel vindicated in that. And if they feel bad about their like extreme sadism, I don't care. Like, that's actually good.
Yeah, and I literally think that a lot of these situations where we're getting to, I don't want to yuck someone else's yum, we're being so open and accepting of these kinks and these things now that a lot of people are using that. For example, men who want to beat women, and they say they have a domination kink or a fetish for that, but they just want to abuse women. I'm sure there are cases where it's being abused more because people are being more open and accepting. And I had that sort of abused on me in a certain
Isn't
situation.
that kind of I feel like that's kind of what happened with like choking. Like choking wasn't really a thing, but now it's kind of considered vanilla because so many people do it and it's so normalized.
Yeah, and the whole like, choke me mommy thing on Twitter or whatever, and like, everyone would comment that, and that was like a trend that people joked about forever. So it was super normalized, right? So I just think that people, like, specifically I've seen within a lot of kinks, and I have been in and out of doing sex work for a long time, since like 2013, 2014. I think that the more openness that I've seen, the more abuse I'm seeing with it. So I do think that shaming people and directly doing so in some instances can be healthy and keep those behaviors in check. Unless, of course, again, their kink is being shamed.
Then the issue is not the kink; it's just people not respecting like your bound. Like,
Yeah.
I have to assume, okay, that those who are pro kink shaming, they're also pro fat shaming. Like that's the way to solve overweight and obesity. Or you're against body positivity. I want you to make the argument if you're against body positivity, because this is also why should we make health let's say at multiple sizes, normalized or accepted, because people just use it as
Well,
an
see, I
excuse.
lost
How
9
is that the-
pounds over the last couple years, and I think that there is fat shaming, but I also think that being conscious of health and realistic is also body positive. I think people took body positivity and ran with it to sort of justify self-destructive behaviors that destroy their health. And I think that when I was a bigger girl, 220 pounds, I was still good looking. I miss having big old titties. Okay. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't healthy. I think that you can be fat and attractive and lovable and loved, but I also think that you need to recognize that you're unhealthy. So I just think that, again,
Okay, so then how would you
and
get
run with it.
someone to recognize, just as I would say it's unhealthy to be overweight or obese
to
or
stop
whatever,
stop
I would also
stigmatizing words like overweight and heavy and
okay,
and
and I would
fat,
also
because
say I would also say it's unacceptable to like as I mentioned in my opening statement and in Katie's of like consent between two adults is like where the sort of like the fundamental starting point.
I want
And so like, I would
to I'm going to put a pin in that because this is where I want to kind of get to. I'm not. I think we can talk about. I think it's very good to talk about what I think Rora and Julie and Ginger are getting at, where it's kind of, or an Allison too, where it's becoming normalized and used as a shield. But I want to talk about the kinks that are consensual. So again, people who are into the extreme kind of knife play, daddy daughter, little big daddy little girl, like age play shit. Is this something that, well, let me just ask you directly, Corey, right? If you found out your friend was, his kink was that his partner, consensually, pretended to be a 6-year-old girl and would wear a diaper or, like, dress up and do coloring books, and that was the way he could get off, right? Is he had to have his partner pretend to be a 6-year-old girl in order to, get sexual gratification. Would you not have issues with that?
If he
Uh,
had to, that's not really a kink, but okay.
well, even like I can totally engage with that hypothetical, even if
that
it
is a
were
kink,
real.
though.
Where it's like that's why it's like I brought up my
That's
opening statement of like
compulsion.
there's a distinction between let's say something being moral and immoral versus something that's unhealthy. I have no problem saying that type of behavior potentially is unhealthy or maybe categorically unhealthy, but I would not necessarily, or rather I actually would not shame them for that, but I would totally encourage them to, let's say, explore. They probably need some other intervention that I definitely cannot provide. Just as I would say to someone who's overweight or obese, I would not stigmatize them, I would not shame them, but I would also point out that is probably or almost certainly unhealthy. You can point out unhealthy things without shaming them or stigmatizing them. That's why, like, if you want to be on the shame side, go for it, but then just go all in. Just say you want to shame fat people. Just say you want to shame a whole bunch of things.
I'd like to actually point out to something that Katie just said, because she actually just blew this wide open for me. The compulsion versus the kink. When does it become a compulsion versus when is like an actual like kink for you? Are they similar? When do those lines get crossed? Because a lot of it becomes compulsion, just like and like an addiction, right? Where it starts off as something that you really enjoy, but then it's like a compulsion, something that pushes you to do it because it's just part of who you are now. So that's very fascinating, Katie. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond to that? Because I was going to say something else. So
Do what you
Oh no,
would.
I just wanted to say that I just appreciate the distinction
Okay.
between the compulsion and the kink. So
yeah, I think my uneducated, I heard somewhere that there's a difference between a kink and a fetish, and one is when you have to do it and one is when you don't, but maybe that's misguided. But there is like an interesting thing to explore about, because we wouldn't call someone being a pedophile that they only can get off on children a kink. That's not a kink. That's the only thing that they can do. So there is a distinction there. But Allison, I want to respond to what you were talking about actually, because you gave a great example of like a guy coming to you and he's like, hey, you know what? My kink is actually punch you in the face until you bleed. Can we do that? And it's totally fine to get freaked out and be like, fuck no, dude, get the fuck out of my house. I don't trust you at all as like a person. That's fine. I wouldn't even call it kink shaming. But then where I would call it kink shaming and where I'd like to maybe us discuss the distinction is when you said you took it one step further, and then it's like you're a sadistic motherfucker, and we should like this is an expression of your sadism, which I consider to be a bad moral trait to have, and so like people shouldn't be like this. So like I think there's obviously compatibility, and that's why consent exists, because some guys would ask you to do anal, and some girls would be like hell yeah, and some guys would be get the fuck out of my bed, no I'm not doing that, you know. So that's how it is. The difference is like, then do we say, oh, guys who want anal, they just are secretly gay, you know, and like project a bunch of our own stuff onto it, or like what exactly are we doing there?
Well, there's a massive difference between beating the shit out of someone and wanting anal sex. I think that's like,
Can you
I
tell
just
me
think
what
that's,
it is?
yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
I think that getting physically beaten up is a lot different than using a hole that's already there that people have been using for pleasure for centuries. I think if you're into anal because it hurts like hell, then maybe it is similar. But I think a lot of people who do anal do it because it feels good. And of course, I know feels good could be very subjective, but I think that if you want to beat the shit out of someone to get off, sure, if you want to do that in private and you're into that, that's fair, right? Enjoy it all you want, but I still think you need fucking therapy.
Right. I still think that like if it's mentioned, you have to know that people are going to be like, maybe I think differently about you now, maybe, or you know. And I'm not saying that that's correct, but you know, you have to be aware that that's going to happen. Just
go
like,
ahead,
Yeah, of
Alice.
course.
Yeah. I want to give space to Allison. She's trying with her like, don't raise your hand like this, right? Where it's like, oh, no. Come on, you know,
yeah, we're
my
all very
kink,
loud.
my kink is large hands up front where I can
hand
see
raising.
them, so I can call them.
We did
That's my
not
kink.
consent. You are
Allison, I
see
I
you.
didn't want to see the palm of your hand. That's disgusting.
For shame.
Yeah.
Allison,
Yeah,
then
that's
Julie.
fine.
Allison, then Julie. Allison, then Julie. Go ahead.
Okay. All I meant by sadistic was like sort of the psychiatric sense, like sadism in like psychiatric, like paraphilia is literally just means getting off on inflicting pain upon others. So I feel like if you are aroused by like punching someone in the face, like I feel like you're just objectively sadistic. And you can say like it's not immoral to have a psychiatric disorder and like that's fine, but that's all I meant by that. But like the idea of like what I read as Planned Parenthood's tweet is like, you know, you have some obligation to like walk on eggshells, like tread lightly, because you don't want to make the person feel bad about their sexual interests, which they don't state, but they kind of imply that these are like immutable traits of the self, like fundamental parts of the self, and that to make somebody, I mean, that's kind of how I read it. Like everybody deserves to explore their sexuality free of shame and stigma. Like that's what they say. They didn't say, you know, people who like light choking or foot fetish. They said everybody. You know what I mean? Everybody.
And I used to be like that, and that was heavily used against me. I had someone who I considered a friend. They were a Twitch mod. I knew this person for years. Many video calls. I have streamers. I have a guest room. They come and stay in my house. We hang out. It's a good time. This person comes and stays with me. And the first thing they do the morning I wake up, I heard my bedroom door open and close. I'm a super light sleeper. I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe it was the bathroom door because it's across the way. I'm out on the porch in the morning when I wake up, having my morning coffee, and he comes out and he goes, I hope you didn't hear anything, but I was having some me time this morning. And he was letting me know he masturbated in my home. And when I focused in on what was happening, he had a dark blue shirt on with dried juices on his shirt. He was purposely putting that out in front of me and letting me know. My response at the time, because I was I don't want to yuck anyone else's yum. I'm trying not to shame, stigmatize. I said, listen, I literally leave tissues in the guest room for a reason. I don't want to hear about it. And that escalated into more and more. He would come into my bedroom while I was looking for an outfit and tell me how people gave him dirty socks because they knew he's a sexual deviant. I set a boundary with him and I explained to him that I was SA'd a long time ago and that I preferred not to be fetishized without consent. And he used that as an opportunity to tell me a story where he was alleging he was SA'd, but then used that as a bridge to tell me about another fetish. Didn't even care about how I felt. And then this person had autism, and I live in the middle of nowhere. We live super far away. So I was like, I can't kick this person out of my house. I literally cannot. I would feel so bad. He would have no way to get out of here. Like I'm hours and hours from an airport. So I'm like now not wanting, and I get it. It's my responsibility to let this person in my house. I 100% understand that I, created that situation, right? By allowing this person in my home, but I had no clue how bad it was. I just thought that you know what I mean? All I knew was he really had a foot fetish prior to this. So it gets worse. My bathroom shares a wall with the guest room, and so does the toilet. Every time I came out of the bathroom, he would be in the guest room on the bed next to the wall there, listening to me going to the bathroom. It escalated more and more to where I was at the store grocery shopping buying deodorant, and he was like, "Oh honey, you don't need that." Oh, because he likes smelly armpits. Now this is a person like what we talked about where it's more of a compulsion, right? But what I'm saying is in these situations when we're being so open about not wanting to kink shame someone, this is what happens. So
Okay.
I think
And then
that
there's a whole host of other issues that results. So I am not a mental health professional at all, but I don't think your story is a testament or lends any credence to kink shaming. I think there's a whole host of other issues to explore there. That is not the place to explore.
My point is that a lot of people see this anti-kink shaming rhetoric and then they apply that to their daily life and they're like, oh, I don't want to yuck someone else's yum. And then they're going to get themselves into situations where they're being fetishized and literally preyed upon without people's consent. This person in particular would always put their fetishes out there. I added it up, put 2 and 2 together from past conversations and realized that, oh, this guy has been sitting in my Discord with my community for months and months talking about his kinks lightly in conversations where we, talk about adult things or whatever, and, private talks with mods. And he did not know this, would be getting off. So I just think that, again, some level of kink shaming is healthy. And I think that when we're constantly not wanting to yuck
I'm just curious.
No,
kind of behavior.
Okay, so I'm curious. If you think there was a greater culture around kink shaming, this situation would not have arisen, or they will prevent situations like this? Like, is that really your claim?
I think that
there's no
there
other
were some
things going on.
where kink shaming was okay.
Maybe some issues with like boundaries and people pleasing and things like that.
Likely.
Hold on. I think what
what
Roar's alluding to is the fact that allowing for any kind of kink shaming makes it harder for maybe I'm wrong, makes it harder for women to be like, hey, don't do that in front of me. Don't do that. Like it makes it more nervous.
But she did tell him not to do that.
Okay, yeah, but prior to that, I got into that situation because I was always so open and just accepting to these people.
No, that's not why. So sexual predators and being a sexual predator is not a kink. This person that has harmed you, and I'm sorry you went through this experience, is not. People will use all types of guises. Sexual predators will do that to grant certain access to things. I'm really sorry you went through that experience. That sounds awful, and it sounds like you continuously asserted yourself, and it sounds like you were constantly being sexually infringed upon. That is not okay. However, I don't see how that relates to this conversation.
Because I think that when we are constantly doing like what the Planned Parenthood tweet was implying to not yuck someone else's yum, I think it gives a lot of space for people like that to exist. That's where I'm coming from here.
I hear you. I disagree because you haven't really explained why. It just seems like something that you feel.
Let me ask then. Let me ask you directly, Rora. Right, and I do want to get other people in here. Right, I know a lot of people want have stuff to say, but can you explain to us how you think that normalizing kinks led to this man using it as a shield, right? Can you draw us? Can you plot us the course? Can you connect the dots for us, please?
I believe that normalization of kinks and openness about don't yuck someone else's yum, which is something he frequently jokingly said. So that's why that tweet is extra annoying. And you can call me anecdotal Andy all you want, but in my personal experience and what I believe is that if we're always open about kinks, it allows a breeding ground for these people to thrive and exist. People are going to abuse it. We need to allow some level of kink shaming so that people don't end up in situations where they're preyed upon because they literally don't want to kink shame people.
Yeah, actually, I'm now in agreement. If we shame it and stigmatize it and then people hide it, it will definitely prevent situations like this, where like if it's just now hidden and repressed, totally, they would be totally bypassed.
If he was doing that on his own and didn't tell me about it,
it will reduce manipulation. And there's definitely no outside issues with like boundaries and people pleasing and a whole host of other things. It's totally the kink shaming aspect. That's the issue there. definitely.
Can I try? Corey, you're being a bitch.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to keep this short. So I feel like you feel like a lot of why things ended up transpiring the way that they did is because at the beginning there was a lot of open consensual talk about kinks, and then you found out that this person was actually getting off on this the entire time. Maybe they start feeling comfortable in that community. Maybe you feel even more violate that person like that was in your community in the first place. My only argument is that I maybe this particular sexual predator needed a space that would like let him talk about his kinks and getting off on it. My point is nearly that like in sexual predators and other types of predators will use all types of techniques to get what they want. As Ginger pointed out earlier, like we all know as streamers that there are guys sitting out there at home like jerking off to us, and some of them message us about it, and we can't do anything about the guys who just jerk off, even though some of us might say, yeah, don't, I wish they wouldn't do that, obviously. But where it crosses the boundary is when they inform you of it, right? That's where they're breaching your consent. So I agree with that part. That's why I call this person a sexual predator. I don't know how saying, hey, don't bring up your kinks in my VC right now would change anything about the scenario that you're talking about. That's my argument.
Well, so I guess in chat, Crawl the Walls brought something up interesting. Kink shaming is what was it? Kink shaming is a phrase dog fuckers and abusers use. What would be your response to that? Do you think it's kink shaming to shame someone for bestiality?
If you're actually shaming them, that's why, like, what are we talking? Like, I don't think we're on the same page of what shaming is.
Do you not think people who are fucking dogs should be shamed?
Like, you're not one to ask that question, okay?
No, this is a question. Can we not answer this? Someone who is fucking dogs, should they not be shamed for it?
Well, you've had this panel before, but I'm happy.
I have had this panel. I'm asking
I'm happy
you
to litigate this as someone who is essentially vegan. I think I can make the defense of like, yeah, I can gladly label that as unhealthy and not respecting consent of sentient animals. And they're like, yeah, this person should seek some sort of intervention, but I would not shame them like that. That's
well,
not.
Let me go around. Allison, would you shame a dog fucker?
Easily, quickly,
okay. Ginger.
Without
Ginger. No. We'll get to you. We'll get to you. You'll go last. You'll get to last. So you'll have the floor. Ginger Ramoth, would you shame a dog fucker?
If they were in my vicinity, I would do more than that.
Okay. We're not gonna get into that. Katie, would you shame a dog fucker?
No, I'll just call the police.
Fair enough. Rora, would you shame a dog fucker?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Julie, would you shame a dog fucker?
Probably.
Okay, Corey, take it away. Take it away, Corey.
Honey, I love you.
Well, no, I just want to like then pose the question to like so like Allison appears to like read some psychiatric research or maybe a lot of research in whatever the psychological domain. So like, how do you understand shame? Can you define that for me? When you say that you're now pro shaming of this behavior, what are you talking about?
I mean, just clearly letting a person know this is a problem. This is a big problem. Because I mean, they might feel ashamed because it actually talks about. I would
shame too then, because that's not shame.
Okay, like, what about saying that you're a disgusting human being who should take their penis out of a dog? Like,
you're disgusting.
Yeah, no, I would not say that. So that's where like I don't think we're on the same. I don't think people understand what shaming is.
What if it was your dog?
I mean.
Well, that's illegal, and I would protect my dog.
Oh, like, now it's illegal because it's your dog.
Shoot them, Corey.
Now it's illegal because it's your dog, but it's not illegal prior.
I don't think you're hearing what I'm saying. I would protect all sentient animals.
No, I don't think you understand what you're saying, because what you're saying is absolute bullshit, Corey. Absolute bullshit. You were trying to figure out what kind of shame he's talking about when they're talking about fucking an animal.
There is an actual definition of shame.
What is your definition of shame?
Oh, well, it's like, my dog, so it's illegal, so I would get them arrested.
No, the sexual assault of any sentient creature is immoral, should be illegal. That includes factory farmed animals. Like, I don't know how it can be more clear of like no violation.
Being clear?
Yes, actually, I know that I'm being clear. Of like, that's why I understand what shame is. That's why I asked for the definition. That's why from the beginning, I want to put the cards on the table saying, hey, what are we talking about when we talk about shame? And when Allison comes in saying, hey, I would just highlight it as a problem, well, then we're not talking about the same thing. I have no problem saying fucking dogs is a problem. But when I say, hey, you're a disgusting piece of shit, no, I wouldn't say that. So if you can't make that distinction in your mind, that's a you problem, not a me
No,
problem.
I can make the
Well, maybe you
distinction in my
wouldn't-
mind. It just makes no sense.
Maybe you
Then
wouldn't
I would-
start off with like insults, right? But okay, I was reading. I have a book on my laptop, and it's called The Clinical Management of Paraphilias. I found it on Sci-Hub just for this panel, and it talks about how a lot of these people don't seek treatment not because they're like repressed and ashamed. There are certainly people with an ego dystonic sexual proclivity, meaning that they are ashamed of it, they feel bad about it. But they actually say that a lot of these people, it is ego syntonic. They're fine with it. A lot of comorbid
Yes.
personality disorders. Okay, and so
Yeah.
if you say, hey, this is a problem, and they're like, well, I respect your opinion, but I disagree. At that point, I think you can go all in, guns a-blazing, fucking make them feel as bad as you want. Like,
if you think shaming a person that has an ego syntonic type of relation, especially with a personality disorder, is going to make them do anything instead of fucking the dog harder, then you're wrong. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
might not
to be-
do anything, but I don't think it's immoral to
to
shame
be,
them.
to be fair, what somebody said in my chat is I don't think you can shame someone who has sex with a dog
Yeah.
because shame is already flown out the window. So
Yeah.
Well,
I
let's
mean,
let's
that's
bring it
why
back.
said
I
what
know we're
said,
being a
but I
little
won't, you know.
hyperbolic with the animal abuse thing, but let's bring it back to people who are engaging in extreme consensual kinks such as extreme BDSM, race play, right? Should
Wait,
you
can
shame
I-
someone? If I had a kink, right? And my kink was like a race play kink where I really loved when my partner pretended to be a slave, right? On the plantation or something. Do you think that I should be shamed for that?
Wick. So, and this relates to what I wanted to say anyway, so fuck you. Okay, so what I want to say is this. No one has to be okay with other people's kinks. You don't have to like them. You don't have to participate in them. You don't have to put up with them. Also, I agree with Rora, I agree with everyone else, that there is a host of what we call kinks on this panel, but I'm not actually sure they fall into this criteria of what I will now say are non-consensual kinks. Like, if someone says that raping a girl is their kink, I wouldn't call that a kink. But if we want to call that a kink, then yes, there are some kinks that we should not societally allow to exist. For me,
Are you
it's
familiar
about
with
consent.
consensual non-consent?
Yes, I am. I
Okay.
participate in it. Thank you.
So, do you consider that a kink?
I will finish my point.
Okay, I'm
Thank
just
you.
trying to define
So,
what a kink.
So I think that the distinction that Corey is trying to make, and I'm not particularly on the dog thing part, but I get what you're saying anyway, is that there's a difference between this is a problem for me. I will not participate in this. In fact, it is disturbing to me that you're bringing this up to me. Don't ever do this again. This is not in my space, which is completely valid and how people should engage, right? So if somebody comes to you then and being like, how dare you kink shame me? I would tell them to fuck the fuck off, right? Because they don't get to enforce their sexuality onto me. However, if we're having a general conversations like we are right now, and we're going to start listing what kinks are bad and immoral and implies that people have personality disorders or sadistics or bad or this or this or this, that's what I would call kink shaming, because we're also saying these people are disgusting, they are lesser, they are harmful, they are this, they are that. So there's a distinction between the interpersonal relationship of like not being enforced upon and just like general things that we say.
$5 from 𝕬𝖎 to say, my bungee jumping, we are normalizing unhealthy ways, by bungee jumping, we are normalizing unhealthy ways of getting adrenaline rush. Same with skydiving, we should shame adrenaline junkies too. Rude Mudcrab for $5 says, let me get to it. A kink should not be shamed. Someone engaging with a kink negatively doesn't make that kink wrong. With consent and zero harm, it's all good, baby.
I mean,
want
you
to
can
give
shame people with adrenaline, but that's not going to do anything.
Sure,
Like,
I want to give space to Julie and to have her thoughts on this. But just real quick, I'll give my take here. I think that while someone isn't a disgusting person, perhaps there are certain kinks that are consensual that are disgusting and people should be disgusted by, right? It should be disgusted by, just
Why?
straight up, because
Like
it age play is a good one. Again, when if that is your kink, that you think it's sexy and great, and you get off when your partner pretends to be like 6 or 5 or something, that is disgusting, and what you are doing is disgusting. Julie, go ahead.
Okay, give me a minute because I need to sort my thoughts. I don't necessarily have a problem with people exploring their kinks in their own space and having safe spaces to do what they want with their kinks. I think it becomes a problem when it becomes prevalent in society and then kind of becomes normalized or almost synonymous with what healthy sex should be. I personally think healthy sex is just vanilla. It's someone you love. And you're just having sex. There's no funny business. We're just fucking. You can do whatever you want to. You don't need to do all that other shit. You don't need to do all that other shit. And I don't like the idea of like, especially like what I said earlier with choking. That wasn't really like something that was prevalent. Like it wasn't very normalized. But now it's like if you don't like getting choked, it seems weird to people, which is crazy to me. I think there's also a problem where people who are exploring their own kinks and are introducing people to those kinks, people aren't really well informed, and then they become traumatized themselves because they don't really know what they're getting into. There's more I can't think, but
Yeah, I agree. There are levels to it for me. If you're open to the people that you're having sex with about your kinks, that's fine. If you're being open about it on, like, let's say Twitter, like I don't need it's absurd to go on Twitter and be like, yeah, me and my boyfriend just, beat the shit out of each other and got off on it type situation. Like that shouldn't be mainstream. That shouldn't be something that we're like promoting for people and being like, hey,
yeah.
this is a healthy relationship. That may be healthy for one particular couple or certain couples or whatever, but it's not something that you should
It shouldn't be something that you think is a part of sex.
Right.
It's not.
Well,
It's a kink. It's not sex.
yes, right. So it's like,
Oh, Julie, you're
there
No,
there are
please.
things.
I'm working my own thoughts out, please.
I know, I'm trying so hard.
I'm so confused by what's going on here. Okay, so I feel where it gets crazy is when like, let's say, perfect scenario, I was friends with this guy and we ended up hooking up one night, and we had been friends for years. I didn't know anything about his kinks, or anything like that, but we ended up hooking up one night. Randomly, we're about to have sex, and he reaches over and he pulls out from a drawer like what looks like a pizza cutter, and I don't know what it's called, but like it looks like a pizza cutter, but it's like the wheel has jagged edges on it.
Yeah.
And they go like inverted, right? And he starts to like roll it down my skin, and I push it away, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm totally into blood play. And I'm like, what the fuck is, like, it had nothing to do with him being into blood play. It had everything to do with the fact that he was just randomly going to cut my skin without my consent. And in any other
Yes.
situation, for a lot of women, they wouldn't know what to do in that situation. So some women would be like, okay, and just let it happen and be fearful of it and just
Yeah.
continue, and it's like, we can't let it lead to those types of situations where it's like, you should be up front about what you're into with the person that you're about to be intimate with, but you should never, fine, be public about it, but expect to be shamed. That's all I'm saying.
I also feel like if you're going to talk about your kinks to someone, you should talk to them about it when you're both like just like chilling, because like it's kind of like, okay, sorry, this is a crazy analogy, but like, when you're grocery shopping when you're hungry and you buy too much food, you should not be talking to someone about their kinks when they're horny. You should have a conversation about it, especially if they're really crazy kinks, because people might do stuff they weren't ready to do.
I think it's healthy to also know, like, and this isn't technically kink shaming, because I understand that it involves some level of dehumanization, but I think to some degree it's healthy to let people know their kinks aren't normal or healthy, and I think that that's why the Planned Parenthood tweet is a bit problematic, because it's everyone. It said everyone, and that's where I think the issue lies. But again,
I want to give a chance. I want to give space to Allison. She had her hand up, and Katie, you're next. So Allison,
Fuck
then
you,
Katie.
Wick.
So I do think that there are scenarios where a person, like, okay, a case study from that textbook I mentioned earlier. Man didn't tell anybody about his kinks, so not forcing them on anybody else. But he loved putting needles in his scrotum. And he was getting constant infections, and he was seriously hurting himself, and he was fine with it. He saw no problem. He's literally in the hospital every other week for some bacterial infection that he is getting from pricking his ball sack over and over and over again. I think at that point, it's like, listen, dude, you have an issue. You're fucked up in the head. Go to a doctor. Go to a doctor. I know you feel fine with it. That's because you have a problem. You have a problem. Go to a doctor. Like, and if that makes them feel ashamed of something that they weren't previously ashamed of, again, it's all consensual. He's doing it to himself. He's not letting anybody else know. But it's a major problem. Major problem.
You're pretty much advocating what I said earlier. Like, you can point out a problem without shaming. Like, I don't. That's why I
Well, what
asked
if
you,
you delicately do it and they don't give a fuck?
Okay, yeah. So, like, if you're reading all this, like, so, Allison, like, how do you understand shaming? What is the difference to you between guilt and shaming?
I think if you make a person feel guilty, like they are ashamed, you have shamed them.
No, that is not true
No.
at all.
Can you elaborate the difference?
Yeah, the difference, academically in the research, and I'd encourage you to consult the research on shame and guilt, and there's a clear distinction between the two. Of like, shame generally comes from a place of you are a bad person, or you are inherently sort of a bad or defective person, as opposed to guilt that is tied to the action. The action is bad, as in when you go to an alcoholic, you would not shame an alcoholic, but you can point out that your relationship to alcohol is unhealthy. It is bad.
Is someone
and you should
doing
seek
that
help.
to themselves? Is someone who is stabbing themselves in the balls with a needle over and over again defective? I would say kinda.
Oh
Yeah.
my
I think it's
God,
healthy to
Brett,
let-
you're
yeah,
such
like,
a-
Then
knowing
Well,
I
probably
was a
just need some
defective person
therapy.
has been a major driving force in me changing and growing. So feeling legitimate shame and feeling like less of a human because of my own behavior was a major driving force in becoming a better person.
I don't think you actually understand your own behavior, but that's a separate topic. But Allison, so you like to read the research, and so I would strongly encourage you to read the research on shame and guilt, and that there's a clear distinction between the two. Because, like, I think you are conflating many different things, and there's a specific definition of shame.
So, Corey, you hijacked my thing, so I'm just gonna. I think it's very clear that the way that pop culture and like kink shaming is also like more of a buzzword than anything else at this point. Like, most people are uneducated. They don't understand the psychological difference between guilt and shame and what that means and how that comes in treatment. So it is silly when people are like, you should get treatment, but they don't know how to get people into treatment. That aside, because I don't want to argue with people who like, it would be pointless because we have a disagreement on what shaming is. What I wanted to talk about is this concept of like displaying it, and like we shouldn't normalize it and make it so like you have unhealthy behavior on Twitter. And with all due respect, I think the main issue here is simply like difference in how much we value people's right to live their life, even if we disagree with their choices. So like, people do unhealthy things all the time. You know, like they post it on Twitter all the time. We tell them they shouldn't do it, but also people smoke, people drink, people do caffeine, people eat a lot of chocolate. Yes, some people stand in front of a cliff and they might die because of it. There are many things that we post on Twitter. No one is saying, hey, society, do this. So when a couple says, I beat my partner up and we both liked it, it seems like we have a sadistic person and a masochistic person who are compatible and are enjoying their consensual time together. You would be surprised. It would probably not normalize the behavior because not a lot of people are sadistic and masochistic in that way, or would be willing to engage in that type of kink. Now, Rora, I think you can make an interesting point there about how some people and women would be specifically vulnerable to that, about men pushing them to potentially engage in physical behaviors that might put them in a disadvantage. However, I don't think kink shaming is the solution for that. I think education around what appropriate sexual behavior is. Ginger, I'm sorry about your experience, but what you said was very correct. The issue isn't the blood play. The issue is that the person you were with is a bad sexual partner.
Well, that's
who
for
attacked
me.
you.
For me, that's just like you know, for an in-person thing. I still don't see that there's anything wrong with, you know, finding out, oh, you're into blood play and going, oh, ew, that's disgusting. That's really fucking gross. Like explaining
That can
that,
be gross to you. Yeah.
right, but being allowed to explain it, like obviously, you know, depending on the kink, you're not going to be like, that's fucking disgusting. You're a terrible person.
Ginger, let me ask you directly, if I may. Would you say that someone is a disgusting person for liking blood play? That they're, as a person, disgusting?
No, I don't think that it's healthy, but I don't think it's a disgusting kink. I think that it's an unhealthy kink.
I think that's what I said in my opening statement.
Yeah, is there any kink where you would say that they're a disgusting person?
Yes,
And
I don't.
which
I
ones?
think that being, I think drinking pee is disgusting. I think
And they are a
people,
disgusting person. To be clear.
No, I would feel like
Okay.
this disgusting person distinction would fall under categories of, I would say maybe, you know, I actually don't think that there is somebody that I would call disgusting, as unless it was something as far as goes like the age play situation you're talking about, like being in diapers or something like that. I think that, but I also feel like that's a medical, like a something wrong in their brain, not something that, like, I think they should seek help. But I don't think, like Katie said, I wouldn't know how to get them that help. But you know, so maybe it would come out that I would be like, that's absolutely disgusting. I could say that it's absolutely disgusting, but I wouldn't say necessarily that they're a disgusting person.
Okay, $5 from Testicle Johnson to say all of this kink shaming is kind of gross, to be honest. If two women love each other, they should be allowed to poop into a cup and then make out with the poop. Allison, take it away.
Thanks.
Okay. I'm not gonna lie, haven't read about guilt versus shame. But when you described shame, you said making them feel like a defective person, quote unquote. Like, I do think some of these extreme, like, paraphilias, kinks, whatever, are indicative of some, like, psychopathology. Like, go back to 𝕵𝖎𝖎, okay? Extreme masochists often have psychological issues. They often have histories of abuse. Like, they have problems that they are working through in an, like, obviously unhealthy way. I think you can say that is defective. You have a fundamental problem with yourself.
Do you think that if someone has a psychopathology, that makes them a bad or a disgusting person?
I use the word defective. Defective. That's what Corey used earlier. Defective. I would say defective.
Okay, so you think that people who are mentally ill are defective?
In certain ways, yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean that we should hate them or not give them compassion or not, like, listen, I care about mentally ill people a lot. I really do. Like, but it is literally a mental defect. That is why there are mental illnesses.
I would argue you don't if you're advocating for shaming, or at least in the actual real sense of how it's used. I'll put a definition based in the research in the group chat, and it'll.
Why don't you just use like a just give us a, like, I'm sorry, I can't think of the fucking word. Just give us an example of what you call shaming.
I mean, I might as well just like read out.
No, can you just give us an example? Like, because that's easier than just explaining the definition, because we've already gone over the definition.
Sure. If like, I think I tried to give an example, but I'll do it again. Like, if you go to an alcoholic that clearly has a substance use disorder with alcohol.
Not an example outside of sexual kinks. We need a sexual kink example of what shaming is.
Okay, sure. I'll even use the example of anal sex, even though I don't have an issue with that. But let's just say someone has an unhealthy relationship with anal sex, whatever that may be. I can point that out as unhealthy, but I would never say you are a bad person. I would never say you are a defective person. I would say that is potentially an unhealthy behavior, and maybe you should seek some sort of interventional treatment for that. Pretty simple.
Understand how saying a person needs medical help for a thing isn't conceding that they are in some way defective. You don't go to a doctor unless you have a problem. Like, if you have a problem, you have a defect.
I'm genuinely asking. I'm sorry if I'm a bit heated with you. I really don't. Did you ever talk to a mental health professional that because mental health professionals don't call people defective? Like they
I mean,
don't say that their mental
is it-
illnesses means that they're defective.
Is it just the wordage then that's the problem?
It is just the wordage. I
It's
think.
literally the wordage
Okay.
right now.
So can you use a
Wording-
nicer word? It's okay to say that.
I posted it in the group chat. Guilt and shame are conceptualized as emotions of self-blame. One of the most investigated theories of guilt and shame has suggested they are distinguished by whether the focus on the self for shame or on the behavior for guilt. And there's abundance of research bearing that out.
Okay,
Now, if you want to change definitions, that's fine. But I just
What I
want to get
think the issue here is, and again, I would like to address that. My prior situation, an example for all of this, was simply I understand there was lack of boundaries. I fully took responsibility for allowing that to happen. But I think the difference between what Corey is saying, and I do agree, right? The definition of shame is what he is saying. But I think when we're talking about kink shaming, and if we ask a lot of kink communities what their definition of kink shaming is, I think it's a little bit different than what Corey's saying. So although I agree that that is what shame is, and I agree that the reality is saying someone needs help for something isn't necessarily kink shaming, a lot of kink communities would disagree with that.
I need to respond. So there's an issue here. First of all, as a person who cares about like mental health issues, I understand that you guys think it's the verbiage. If you're claiming to want to help these people, that you're so worried about their negative behavior, maybe you want to have any understanding of how you should talk about these people to try to actually help them. If you were that actually concerned about the way they're harming and they need help, that is simply not how it's discussed. And like, if you're going to send people to get medical help because they're so mentally broken in your eyes, you should probably know how the mental health community actually thinks about those people and not just look at it from your own normative lens.
Bipolar disorder. I have a mental defect. That is what that is. It's not a fucking fun thing. It's a bad thing. It's a problem. It's a defect.
Yes, you can have a mental health disorder. I have some too. Does that, we're now talking about, okay, I'm not going to go and I'd be interested in talking to you about it if you want, but like, I'm not going to tell you if you're a defective person or not. I'm just not going to do that. So, it's okay that you conceptualize yourself as defective. I don't know what to tell you. Okay. What I wanted to say, however, is this idea of, fuck, I don't remember what I wanted to say. It's fine, Wick.
Okay.
I'll remember.
It's fine. When you remember, let me know. I guess, can you, Rora, because you mentioned that kink shaming in the kink communities isn't what Corey would define as shaming. Can you kind of educate us on what the kink shaming community, as you understand it, would define as kink shaming? Can you give us some examples of what you would say that
Well,
the kink
I've
community...
been accused of kink shaming by simply, like, as an example, which Corey would say isn't shaming, is telling someone they need help. I do think telling someone they're disgusting is dehumanizing, and I do think that can border on shame, but I think that telling someone they're disgusting is a really extreme example, and I'm going to be honest, I'm a kinky person. I have kinks myself, but they, you know what I mean? I'm not, I guess, in any extreme realm. So again, I am very open and understanding, and I do agree that there's a lot of examples where people can enjoy things behind closed doors consensually. If it's not hurting anyone else, that's fine. But I think that there's a lot of different people who in different kink communities, which I have dated people with a lot of kinks, who would call it kink shaming, simply telling them that you don't like it, that you think that it is a problem, that you think they might need help. And I think that that's the issue, is that when you're so open and accepting to, you know, people with all types of kinks, that it enables this type of thing where people are now, anytime you tell them they need help, saying that you're kink shaming them. And again, my issue isn't Corey's definition of shame, it's that everyone else who may have a kink and may consider a certain thing kink shaming, they're using that differently. I think my issue is simply that.
Any response?
Well, I mean, that is a fair issue in terms of people not being, let's say, respectful or just, I don't know, some sort of compliance with social norms, although there's a whole conversation about that. But like, yeah, I agree. People should be respectful of boundaries. People should ideally read the room, but some people can't read the room. We're like, yeah, I agree with you. Having something thrust upon you, not a good thing. And I would never advocate for that. That's why I want to be clear of what we're talking about. But that's pretty much where I'm at.
Wick, I remember what I wanted to say.
Go ahead. And then I have another question to kind of maybe move this on.
So it feels like a lot of people on the panel want to focus specifically on harm that is done in more extreme cases of kink. And I understand the concern there. The issue that I'm trying to bring up is that consent is there to basically render that like the choice of the individual participating. So as we allow many adults to make many decisions that might be harmful to them, but we don't shame them for making those decisions, and we allow it in society, like alcohol consumption, for example. But then we do this thing in this when we say, well, if your kink is like extreme blood play, then that's harmful. And it's like not harmful if it's consensual and both people are aware of what they're doing. That's the point.
Katie, it absolutely is. If your kink, even consensually, is to have someone beat you black and blue, right? If that's your kink, you consent to it. It's not might be harmful. It is harmful. You are hurting yourself.
So is drinking alcohol.
I think there's not even something just physically, not only just physically wrong, but there's something also mentally wrong there too. You don't get to that point where you want to be abused to that point without there being some sort of PTSD involved. Like I doubt that anybody is into extreme, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm just saying, I doubt that there's anybody that's, into extreme BDSM that hasn't had a sort of interaction with PTSD or trauma in the past. Like there's a reason that is at the forefront of your mind. But I do want to bring something to the chat or the panel that I wanted to ask you guys. I'm sorry, but this did come in to my chat, and I thought that was interesting. Isn't the value of a kink that it's something which most consider taboo?
So Ginger, just I'll let you the chat engage, because I think it's interesting. Just to say, like, the argument that you're making now is the argument that people who are anti-sex work are making. They're just like, well, most of the women who do sex work were traumatized and they have some trauma or PTSD. I think that there's a big difference between doing sex work and asking to be beaten to a bloody pulp every night. One is more stigmatized than the other.
Well, again. And
it's in the opposite way, though.
I just want to test your boundaries here, Katie, right? So hopefully, maybe I'm wrong here, but there are things that are so harmful that you would say, even if someone consents to it, we shouldn't let them do it. So selling yourself into slavery, consensually, is that something we should allow?
We're talking about sex, Wick.
Sure. Sexual slavery. Someone wants to sell themselves into sexual slavery. Should we allow it?
What do you mean? There are people who have relationships where
I'm talking literally sexual slavery. They want to sell themselves.
Okay, Wick, that's what I'm talking about. You're so unaware of the kink community that you don't even realize that that's what I'm telling you. Yes, there are people who consent to be used as sex toys to their partners.
And you think that's okay to allow?
Are you gonna arrest them?
What if they're consenting to be eaten, literally?
Good for them.
I think that's actually happened.
Yes, it has actually.
Yes, that's happened.
It has.
And you think that's okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I have an interesting point to make. You know how, on this panel, we're kind of having an issue with the distinction, like Corey said, between guilt and shame. I think a lot of people who think they're being kink shamed also have that issue with that distinction as well. They feel guilt and they think it's shame. And I think a lot of people have an issue with that distinction. And I think that's kind of where we're stuck.
I would agree with you, but the reason why I'd push back on that is because this panel has demonstrated that whenever we're saying, oh, maybe this behavior is harmful, then someone would come and immediately talk about how the person is defective for having a mental disability, right? So clearly it's not about the action. It's about that the action implies that there's something wrong with you as a person, which
I didn't
this
say
panel
there was anything
continues to
defective
demonstrate.
I
Not
agree
you,
with that
Ginger.
myself.
I mean, there was
I don't think people should be shamed for like practicing kinks in their own time. I think people like I just think kinks should not be prevalent in society, especially when they're really violent. I think that's something you should do in your own time, and you can have your safe space to talk about that with other people. But I just don't want it to become something that's normalized because I don't want it to become something that's part of like
Just a quick question.
Sex.
Quick question for the panel. Irrelevance wanting in. Should we let him in?
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Jump backstage, Relevant. Sure, we'll let you in.
Ugh.
Oh,
Only
if I
Katie.
can-
No,
only
Katie.
if
If
I
you
can
don't, if
kink
you're not okay with it, Katie,
No,
we'll keep
it's
him on.
fine.
You sure?
Katie, I
If I
love
can
you
kink
still.
shame
I love
him,
you. I hope
no.
you love me.
Okay.
I want to be able to
Sylvia,
kink
1
shame him
second.
though.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
I
go
want to
ahead,
ask
Wick,
Julie
sorry.
though. I want to ask Julie because I want to engage with her because you said that people in the privacy of their home, we shouldn't really worry about it.
Yeah.
Would you also have Katie's take if privacy of their home, they're not telling anyone about it, but again, their kink is to be eaten, is to have bits of their body cut off and eaten. Do you think that that's okay? That shouldn't
I
be
think it's
shamed?
pretty fucking whack, but like, what am I gonna do about it? Am I really gonna stop anyone from doing that in their own time?
Go,
Yes.
Julie!
We do this all the
No.
time. We stop people from self-harming all the time. Yes, we do.
We
absolutely do.
I don't know
If
about
someone's
that
on
one.
the bridge, and looking to jump, we stop them, and we should.
That's not self-harming. That's
That-
trying to kill yourself. That
Well,
do you know?
I think there's a lot of
Like,
instances
please.
where
Cutting
you really-
themselves all
you
the
don't-
time,
you're
we
not
put them in a
able to
psych ward.
interject even if you want to. People are
Yeah,
gonna do what
but
they
a
want to
lot
do
of
behind the
people who
scenes,
cut
whether you want
themselves are
to
not
or
in a
not.
psych ward.
Well, so actually, so Allison, you brought up something I think is very poignant because I've posed this hypothetical before. You bring up self-harm and cutting. If someone doing that, should they be shamed for that?
I mean, if you have tried to say the action is bad, the action is very bad, and they don't care, you say, listen, this is indicative of a mental problem you have. You would not be doing this if you were well. You wouldn't be. And I mean, yeah, it implies that they have some sort of defect, whatever you want to call it. But like, I mean, if that is shame, then sure. Like, you save the person even if they feel bad in the moment.
Okay, so
It's
going
long-term goals.
would you point out to them, as someone who's actively engaged in this, cutting self-harm behavior, would you say, hey, you're a bad person?
No.
Well, that's shaming. That is pretty much the definition of shaming, at least used in the research. And you seem to be pro-shaming, just as some people here. So why would you not say that? Shouldn't that be the greatest motivation for change? Do you think that would inspire someone who's cutting themselves that, hey, there's their wake-up call. You are a bad
I think
person.
he's shaming you for the way you shame people.
Can you
I think
repeat
it's a
that, sorry?
last resort. I think it is a last resort, but it is acceptable if everything else does not work.
So you're
doing whatever you can for the person.
Do you have any research to back that up?
No,
you
I didn't look into guilt versus shame. I'm not gonna lie. I was looking into paraphilias and whatnot. Like,
isn't
So
guilt
that's
like
why
guilt is like someone feels bad about it for doing it themselves, like they feel guilty for doing it. Shame is like you make someone feel bad about it. Wouldn't that be the difference? Am I crazy?
Well, I want
he's
to.
saying guilt is action, shame is self. I'm saying if you have tried to make the person feel bad about the action and it's just not fucking happening, you can say, listen, this is indicative of a problem with the self.
I mean,
Which I wouldn't say you are a bad person, but I think saying this is indicative of a problem with the self, I think that meets the definition of shame that's been like reported here.
But you're doing that to help that person?
I mean, yes, I would say yeah.
No, because here's my thing with this argumentation. If you're saying I'm trying to protect society from these defective people, and that's why I'm doing it to feel good about myself.
I'm trying to protect them from themselves.
Then research shows that what you want to do is causing people to harm themselves more. So
Would
you're
you
not
consider
helping.
someone a bad person who gets off to harming people? Like, just a question for anyone who wants to answer. Like, if someone gets off on, say, cutting someone, and they're the cutter and they want to hurt someone, or if, say, they get off on beating the shit out of someone, I don't necessarily have a stance on this. I'm just curious. Would you consider that person a bad person if they get off on harming someone?
Not
necessarily, no.
No.
Is it consensual?
Yeah, like if you're talking about someone's violent, like
what?
Like, yeah, if you're talking about assault.
I feel like you probably have some deep-seated issues that you need to get help with if you get off on actively harming someone. Like, you probably need to if you're engaging in a kink where you're actively harming someone, you probably need therapy on the side so you can understand why you're doing that, so you don't kind of go off the rails with it.
Okay, Julie. So there are a lot of thoughts that people have that they don't act on. And usually we take people's actions to be an indication of who they are because we don't have an access to people's thoughts, right? So when we say someone is getting off on hurting someone, if they're getting off on it on literally they tied them down, the person is screaming and they're cutting them, yes, they are a bad person. If it's a consensual interaction, no, they are not a bad person.
Katie.
In fact,
I have to
I
agree
would
with
argue.
her on
No,
that.
wait, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Wait. Sorry, Julie, I wasn't yelling at you. I was yelling at Wick.
But you can still yell at me, but like
Okay, done. But look, so what I'm saying is simply that, in fact, I'd argue that some people with some levels of kinks might benefit from engaging in those kinks consensually.
Do you think they need therapy on the side?
So they don't engage in those kinks non-consensually.
Do you feel like they might need therapy on the side to understand kind of why they're acting that way and kind of like get themselves in a comfortable space where they can like engage with that with other people?
I feel like we all need therapy, Julie. That's my point. Every human on this planet needs therapy.
Let me ask you, Katie. Then I want to. Yeah, I want to ask Katie. Then I want Irrelevant to get in here. He just jumped in. Welcome.
Hey, Riley.
Katie.
Hey, thank you.
What is the difference here? What is the difference here? Okay, so you already said someone who ties someone down and starts cutting them and gets satisfaction on it, that's a bad person, unless the person said, I consent. So those two words means the same situation. Someone's tied someone down and is cutting them and getting off hurting them.
No, Wick. I swear to God. I know that you're a man, right? And men are really confused on the concept of consent, okay? I get that. I do. If you think consent is just about the two words of I consent, you don't understand what consent is.
They bought into it. They're like, yeah, I want this.
I'm not done. So when I say it's consensual, I mean that there's actual informed consent, not under coercion and other asterisks because you don't know what consent is. If you are confused what I mean by consent this entire time, and you just think you can say I consent and I'm okay with it, then you're wrong.
No. In any scenario where any amount, you can define consent however the fuck you want. And and this works for every single scenario down the line, from signed contracts, from like years of years of going through this and prepping, all these things. Someone who is tying someone down, cutting them, and getting sexual gratification is a bad person. Case closed.
What? If they're consenting? No.
Yeah, even if the other person's consenting, it does not matter. If you are tying someone down, cutting them up, and getting sexual pleasure of it, you are a bad person.
It's okay that you feel that way. I don't care what you feel.
Okay.
Irrelevant. Go ahead.
Can I get it? Okay. I think there's more dimensions than just consent. Okay. So for instance, I'm a super vanilla guy. Okay. Super giga vanilla. All right. It's got me in some trouble. Okay. It's just like really basic shit. Okay. I know. Listen, I'm a super vanilla guy, but I do a lot of things that are not vanilla because the other party sexually wants it. Okay, so I can get sexual gratification out of doing things I don't want to do on my own because my partner wants to do it. So I think it's a little bit more complex. Could I get sexual gratification out of hurting my partner? Maybe. I've never done it. Maybe if they are getting sexual gratification out of me doing it to them. So I think just simply saying, if you get sexual gratification out of hurting your partner, you're a bad person. I feel like this is kind of one-dimensional on that aspect of it. Okay, and then number two. All right, number two. Well, I mean, we can get to like what I explained there or whatever, but number two, like what you were saying there, Wick, where you are a bad person in that scenario. I think it really depends on, like, again, why you're doing it. Right? I agree that you should examine why you're doing anything, why you're interested in anything. But I think just making a blanket statement, it is fine, or it is not fine, or it is bad, or whatever, I think this misses the point.
So let me respond to this. So if someone comes up to you, if you're dating a girl, and the girl's like, hey, can you tie me up and cut up bits of my flesh and, then just, drop fat loads on me, like fat ropes on me, you should tell them no. You should say no. right? You should say no. And if you don't say no, you're a bad person. Does that help?
If you don't say, wait, why?
If you don't tell them no, because harming people, even consensually, is wrong in these extreme circumstances. Now, again, there's a spectrum here, right?
Oh,
If she's just
yes.
asking for light choking or whatever, okay, whatever. But there is a spectrum here. But they're on the extreme ends. Even if they ask you to do it, if you consent to it, you are wrong for doing so, and that makes you immoral and a bad person. I stick with this. Let me read some super chats, and we'll get into it. You can respond. $10 for fondue. Andrew Tate has been on video beating women. He gets a pass because of it because it's a kink. Everyone can't be a PhD on philosophy to set boundaries in society. $20 from Lawson Harrison. The same research on guilt also shows that shaming people for political beliefs, ideologies has a similar effect. I'm hoping the panel practices what they preach for both cases. And $2 from Zephyr Hash. I just want to say I 100% agree with Katie today. And $2 from Rude God Crab to say Relly isn't vanilla, then he's sub. Okay.
No.
I guess too. Yeah, I would say I'm a bit of a people pleaser. Sure.
Aw. Wick, can I tear into you consensually?
Go ahead. I can't
Actually,
stop
before-
you, but go
But
ahead.
before you do, can I just ask, what do you think about like the amputee kink, Katie?
What's the amputee kink?
People get off on amputizing themselves. So I mean that's
Called
something that's,
𝕵𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜.
yeah. So that's something that's just solely self-based. Do you feel like there's anything like inherently like unhealthy about that?
If there's something inherently unhealthy about that, it's probably, well, depends. I assume it's not one time, which means there's not going to be much left at
Right.
some point,
It
which will
usually
lead
does.
to like,
It does continuously get worse for people who have that kink. Yes.
yeah.
But
Is that a kink?
based? Yes. I
Is
think
that
it's called
really a kink?
acrophilia or something like that.
Acrotomophilia is when you get off on other people being amputees. 𝕵𝖴𝑖𝑑𝑒𝑚𝑖nophilia is when you get off on yourself being an amputee.
What the hell? Apodominophilia?
Do you get off on the fact that you are now an amputee, or do you get off on the amputation itself?
Both.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I think that this is. What did you ask me? I'm sorry. What specifically are
Do
you
you-
asking?
do you think
I'm
that
just
there's-
learning, you know?
Do you think that there's anything like inherently unhealthy about the idea that they're eventually it's going to eventually get to the point where they no longer have anything that they can do that with, or I mean just inherently is it unhealthy in general? Is there a point to saying something should be done about that?
Yeah, okay. So I'll answer it this way. Of course it's unhealthy because eventually there's not going to be anything left, right? So I'm not interested in the health argument. Human adults do a lot of things that aren't healthy for them. So I don't care that people do stuff that are unhealthy for them. I'm an agency person, an autonomy person. In terms of this specific kink, the problem is that it's going to lead to a lot of problems. So I guess it's like, until you have nothing left and then you're screwed. But also they are probably, I don't know if they probably have other mental issues. I wonder about that. So yeah, I want them to seek help, right? But that's because we want everyone to seek help.
Would you, okay, just once, your partner just wants it once, wants you to cut their finger off. It's their thing, right? Right? And they ask you.
Yeah, no.
Do you think it's okay? No, but do you think it's okay to say yes to that for another person, not you, but someone who's okay with it, to say, okay, yeah, I'll cut your finger off if that's what you want?
I think if you had conversations about it, if it's like a long process that you discuss, if it's done ethically, then yeah, I don't have an issue with that.
Okay, no, the answer to this is there is no ethical circumstances where it's okay to just cut someone's finger off.
Okay, so Wick, I understand that you
Unless
don't
it's got
have-
gangrene.
Okay,
Right, they got
Wick,
gangrene or something,
Wick,
right?
Wick, I understand that you have a certain version of what you think ethics is, which is okay. So, if we're talking philosophically here, I do think that freedom and agency and autonomy supersedes other things. As I said, we do unhealthy things all the time. And I think society mostly decides what's okay to do to yourself and what's not okay based on stuff that are normalized or stigmatized, not because it has inherent sense into it. I would actually like to ask you, Wick. So you, I think, know that I had pain during penetration for most of my adult life, since I was 17 till I was 24. So every time I had sex, which is a lot, I would be in a lot of pain. I couldn't stand afterwards. Do you think the boyfriend and husband that fucked me were bad people for doing that because I wasn't enjoying our sex? I was in pain.
Enjoyment. It's not the enjoyment, and it's not necessarily the pain. It's the permanent physical damage that can result from engaging this.
There was
kind of
no
thing.
permanent physical damage.
Exactly. But
okay,
when you beat someone,
so
black and blue.
No.
Let me answer your question. If you want me to answer your question, you got to let me answer your question. Because
I'll let you.
If they were beating you back black and blue, that has a much higher risk of causing permanent physical damage. And yes, even if you consented to it, even if you begged for it, even if you pleaded on your hands and knees.
Answer my question.
Wait, I am answering your question. One is okay because there's very low chance of permanent physical injury. But one is not okay because there's a very high chance of permanent physical injury.
So it's okay that they fucked me.
I can maybe drill.
And now shut up, Corey.
Okay,
go ahead. Okay? Are they bad people? Wick?
Given the context that you have laid out, no.
Okay, so I have a follow-up, Wick, using your metric of this permanent physical damage. So I'm using your example of cutting, presumably your partner's fingers off consensually. In your world, does it become morally acceptable when we get to the place where we can regrow fingers, or we can have a new finger attached that's been grown in a lab? Is it now morally permissible to do that?
I'd have to re-examine it. But given that we don't live in that world, then currently, as it stands now,
but where are your moral intuitions now? Like, if we get to that world,
I think that it becomes more of a question like, how long does it take? Right? Are we talking a month without a finger? Are we talking a year without a finger? Are we talking like the devil's in the details here? I can't imagine a scenario in a sci-fi world that it does become okay. I can't. But devils will be in the details. But we got a lot of people raising their hands.
I want to say something about what Katie said.
And Allison, I think, is saying something or wants to say something.
Perfect example.
I know, but I raised my hand before she did, so that's. Sorry, I just want to say this real quick. I feel like what you were describing, Katie. I think that if they were getting off on the idea that you were in pain, yeah, I think they're a bad person.
Okay, but Sharon Lopatka.
But if they just got off despite it, that's fine.
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, if they're just having sex with you to have sex with you, yeah, like if it's your decision to have sex, perfectly fine. But if they are getting off on the idea that you're having pain during the sex, and you don't get off on that, that's bad.
So you'd be fine with a couple, like with a woman saying, I get off on you beating me up. And then like Irrelevant is like, look, I'm not going to get off on beating you up, but I can be you if you want me to. And then Irrelevant like punches her in the face and like breaks her face and like crushes her skull, right? Because and he enjoys that she's screaming in delight, but he's not getting off on the punching. He's getting off on her like orgasming, right? So would that make him not a bad person?
I'm gonna have to admit that you lost me on.
Is it maybe that
he's not getting off on her pain. He's getting off on her getting off.
Is it maybe that breaking someone's face open for any reason is a bad thing?
Yeah,
yes.
But wait. We have to ask Ginger.
Yeah, no. Okay, so the problem is that you don't get off on pain. And you were having sex, yeah, right. You were having sex with men, and you were asking the question: are they a bad person for doing that, right?
Yeah.
If they're specifically getting off on the fact that you're in pain while you're having sex, and that is not your kink, then they are a bad person.
Okay, so my question is: if I have a kink of getting off on pain and my partner does not, is he a bad person for hurting me? Okay, and what if I have a kink of getting off on pain and they have a kink of getting off on me being in pain and we both have that kink?
I don't think that it makes you bad. I think that it will, but it's unhealthy and it will lead to bad ramifications.
Okay, good.
Say this or bad. $5 for Testicle Justice, and I want Allison to go. Onomatopoeia, when you're turned on by the phonetic sounds of words. Noted. But to answer the question, yeah, sadists are bad people. I'll bite that bullet. Go ahead, and then Allison, then Arola.
I hope you bite it straight into your brain in a video game.
Real life example. Her name was Sharon 𝕵𝖎𝖙. She had a fantasy of being murdered. Spoiler alert, she was murdered. The murderer tried to convince her to not get murdered. She said, quote, "I want the real thing. I did not ask for you to preach to me. If my body is never retrieved, don't worry. Know that I am at peace." The man who killed her was a bad person for murdering a person to get off.
Did he get off on that?
Wait,
yes.
Did he get off on that?
He was a sadist. She was a masochist.
But even if he didn't get off, it's a bad thing.
Yes.
Well, I would
murder bad.
So,
Yeah.
So there's kind of an issue that I have here. Does everybody here believe in the right to suicide?
No, I don't.
Of course not. Do you hear this, people?
No.
Like, what is the question?
Okay, so if you do not believe in the right to suicide, this is going to be like a harder bridge to gap. Like, I very much believe in somebody's right to be able to like kill themselves and take themselves out of a terrible situation they're in, right? And so like harm could be a part of that as well. Like your ability to like try or your ability to do
I
things
think the
like
problem
that,
comes
I don't
from
think this is-
asking someone to put that harm on you rather than doing it to yourself.
Yeah.
So
you're
that's
putting
that's
yourself
the
into it.
yeah. So I'm going now to the second position, right? So I believe in somebody's ability to harm themselves. However, to a specific degree, I think we all agree there's a certain level. Even 𝕬𝖎 agreed there's a certain level of harm that might. So, like for instance, I've never met a person sexually that hasn't been into some kind of like hair pulling or like hair shit or whatever, right? It's just it seems extremely common. Okay, so things like that, it could be a little bit painful, but I don't think anybody would disagree with the idea that if you pull someone's hair during sex, it's not that big of a deal, right? Nobody here
Like I said,
thinks that's crazy.
some levels are,
Right.
are fine, but there's some levels where it's absolutely not fine.
Exactly.
Right?
So we need to hit that there's certain levels of harm that we do not believe an outside party can do to another party, even if you believe in the right to suicide like me, right? So an extreme example is that murder case, right? If somebody's like, hey, I want to die, right? I think it'd be hot if you killed me. I can believe in their right to choose how they wish to die. If they want to jump off a fucking bridge, if they want to do whatever, right? I can believe in the right for them to be able to die whatever way, but I shouldn't be participating in helping them facilitate that activity, because I don't think there is any amount of consent that person can give me that feels sufficient to be able to participate in that activity. And where we draw that line is going to be different between everybody on this panel, and is probably manifesting in a significant difference that we're having.
Really? Do you believe in assisted suicide? Do you support that?
Yeah, I would believe in some form of assisted suicide, but not like I'm gonna shoot this person or something like that. If somebody's if somebody's on a IV,
medical assisted suicide.
Yeah, medical assisted suicide.
Yeah.
Is what
Is
I would
anyone
say.
else
Medical-
So I have a question. If we legalized a certain like type of situation where you could go to a professional that fulfills your murder fantasy kink, and that is your suicide method, and we legalize that, do you have a moral issue with that?
No. If somebody wants to kill themselves and they're like, you know what? I think it'd be fun to die this way. So be it.
Awesome. I agree.
I couldn't. The assisted
Yeah, but you're
suicide
dumb.
debate is a different debate, but it is a debate I'd love to have.
Well,
with you.
I think it's connected, because it's about the harm that you can, because if you disagree with suicide, then obviously you're going to disagree with like harm. Like, because you would disagree that anybody under any circumstance can consent to another person doing X amount of harm to them.
That's not
Let's
true.
say hitting them.
That's not
or
true
something.
though, because
I don't think that's
not
true.
though, because Katie is against the right. You said that you were against self-suiciding, right, Katie?
No, God, no.
No,
Oh, I thought
don't
that
think
that's.
she did.
I'm so sorry. I
I
thought
did.
That's what you
I
said.
said
Never mind.
I said I think
supported
it's
all
I think there's a
suicide.
difference
In a
there's
video
difference
game.
between self-inflicted harm and asking someone to put harm onto you.
There is a difference. But if you do not believe even yourself can consent to extreme levels of harm to you, then you would never agree that another person could inflict that harm onto you. So it's a first order thing. Do you understand? If I cannot do it to myself, then obviously another person can't do it to me, right?
No, because you might harm that person asking to do that to you. You might traumatize them on the way.
Yeah, but that's still
Then you find somebody that has a kink of murdering somebody.
What I'm saying.
No, but it's
How-
different. It's different.
Wait,
They're different,
Whoa.
but like you cannot
Wait,
you
wait.
can't disagree with that idea, no?
Wait, irrelevant. You
Yeah.
heard Allison's murder story, right?
Yep.
How can you be against that but for assisted suicide
The reason why I'm for assisted suicide
versus that?
is-
Because that's just assisted
is
suicide.
You
usually
guys want
it's
Made in
because
America?
it's because it's not like a kink thing in assisted suicide. It is a very structured medical situation
Yeah,
where
I
this
get it.
person wants to terminate their own life, and another situation is just like, damn, bruh, I think it'd be really hot if I slit your throat.
Which
Like
that
that's
is that is legal in certain places. Not the kink part, but the
Well, Canada
assisted
has made
suiciding.
you can, if you're suffering from cancer or whatever, you can ask to get like assisted
Which should
death
be
or whatever.
allowed.
It
Like you're allowed to do that. Sorry, you're allowed to do that to
terminally
animals.
ill, you're gonna die anyways. Like,
I don't want. Okay, we're gonna move off the assisted suicide thing. That's a different topic.
I was on that
Promise
panel.
you.
Wade.
Promise you. No, it's fine. It's fine. I want to get back to the not
Good. I
harmful.
want to get back to that too. So
Yeah,
I hate you. You
can I-
are saying wrong things.
Me?
So Wick, no, Julie, you're wonderful. You're such a
I
good
love
girl.
you. Okay, I got scared.
Mwah. Okay.
Wick, you're getting cucked on your own panel. Just pointing it out.
Yeah, I know.
That happened to Wick with Katie. Yeah, no.
It does.
She cucks him repeatedly on.
Just
And
constantly.
he likes it, so
Do
it's
I?
fine. Yes.
I'm gonna kink shame you.
Look, I want to get back to the non-harmful, the non-directly physically harmful kinks that I think maybe we could discuss might be shameful and people should be ashamed of it and shamed for it and called defective or whatever. Can we not discuss age play here, right?
I think age play is the best example. Yeah, I think age play is the best example because it pulls on everybody's like emotions, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's fucking
That's
gets
the
at
worst
you.
example. Ralph.
That makes it the best. That makes it the fucking
Yeah,
best.
so-
because
Okay,
it's the
what's your
extreme
position
ones.
then?
It
This
tests you the
panel
most.
calls but here's the problem. This panel doesn't. We can't agree on what shaming and what kink is, and now you want to bring age play, and everyone's going to call that pedophilia, right? Like it's
Oh,
not going to
pedophilia.
go anywhere.
I don't know if it's pedophilia.
So I personally
Okay, so
find-
we all wait. Do we all agree that age play is not necessarily pedophilia?
Sure, but even if it's
Yep.
not necessarily pedophilia, it's still
okay, that's
shameful.
good.
What if it's a geriatric age play?
I would say just I would say just
to be
If
clear,
there's
because it's
61
not
and they're 41.
just because it's not pedophilia doesn't mean it's not shameful. Like
Yeah.
I like I
Yeah.
said, I feel like a lot of kinks are initially kinks because they're taboos because they have
Make
an
people feel
aspect
dirty
of
and they
shame
like it.
to them. But a lot of people
That's fine.
prefer that about their taboos. So it's like, it's while they don't prefer like people being, oh, you're a piece of shit, like that's what they think about when they're getting off on it.
As long
is-
as we're not going to pretend like people who do age play are necessarily pedophiles.
Not
they're
necessarily,
they're not
but there's-
pedophiles. They're
If you are
just
getting
gross.
off on the thought of someone pretending to be a 6-year-old girl or a 6-year-old boy,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yes,
there's
what?
something wrong with you.
What about a Catholic schoolgirl?
I think there's something wrong. I don't know if it's necessarily pedophilia though.
Yeah, and underage sex, I don't know if it's pedophilia. I don't.
Yeah.
We can debate
still
whether it's
weird.
not or not, but it's
'Cause
not just weird. I'm going
not
further
all
than
age
weird.
play is like that.
Yeah,
Not
I'm
all
going
age
further
play.
than weird
Stop it.
because I don't think weird is wrong. I think it's morally wrong. I think
Okay,
there's something wrong with you.
What about an incest?
Yeah,
kink? My
Wick,
dad
but
just
you're
brought
not
that up.
you're not explaining why. You're just
Yeah,
like
why
saying
is
my
it wrong?
fifis are
I
hurt.
know, because you keep interrupting me while I'm talking.
Actually,
So I can't
babe.
explain anything. I have to use very short, quippy language because if I try to explain it, you interrupt, go in there,
You
and try
sound
to
like
get
a
on
little
me on the
girl,
very
Wick.
thing.
It's turning me on.
Good.
Come on.
Good. That is the whole purpose and the reason I put this panel together, to sexualize
Good.
all of you. Yes, you too now are relevant by coming on here. You've consented, knowingly or not, to be
You've been
sexualized
fine
by
with
me
this.
for my
Yeah,
kink.
fuck,
Okay.
buddy.
Parallax,
Someone just
thank you
called
for
me
this
dumb
up.
and I kind of liked
Okay.
it, so.
So the reason why this is morally wrong is because I think that it encourages, it normalizes behavior that it is harmful to society to normalize. So when you engage in these practices, when you engage in these practices that normalize things that society should not be normalized at all, again, it's a spectrum. We could talk about these things, but this is to such an extreme degree that I think that it becomes immoral. When you are normalizing people pretending to be 6 years old, 8 years old, even 14-year-old girls or boys in order to get off, then yes, I think you are doing a harm, and that is immoral.
Okay, so I have a follow-up where it seems like you're coming from the place of like, yeah, if this becomes widespread in society, then, you know, meets your threshold of like, this is like harmful. Do you take the same approach to, let's say, alcohol and vaping? We don't want everyone vaping and
to
drinking.
a certain extent, yes. I think that the normalization of drinking alcohol has done harm, and if you are normalizing this, the companies who have done this are immoral. Yeah.
And do you think these are inherently bad people, these vapors and people drinking alcohol?
Depends on context. I think you can be, but depends on the context. No, vaping's different, right? I don't know what's wrong with vaping. I don't think it does.
I agree. It's harmful to other people as well.
But alcohol, absolutely. Drunks who go and drink so much, then get in the car and kill people, or go home and beat their wife or children, right? And alcohol, drinking copious amounts, increases the likelihood of this happening by a lot.
But yeah,
right?
I read a study about that. The prevalence of physical violence under circumstances of people being drunk. It's like high. I forgot that. I can.
There's a
find the numbers.
strong correlation between alcohol use and sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and a whole host of other things.
So yes,
it seems like if we
normalizing
shamed alcohol
this,
usage,
yeah,
it would be the
shame.
best thing for society.
And we
100%.
have, and alcohol use among the youth have gone down. It's working.
No, it's not
Wick,
the result.
You are delusional.
There's no way.
Like, what are you talking about?
Okay, we know this, that people who are younger, the younger generation, is drinking less
It's
than
not from shame.
Prove it.
Also,
Yeah,
wait,
absolutely.
no. What do you mean we shamed it? Are you saying that
We
like
had all
drinking
sorts of
alcohol
programs.
is stigmatized in society?
We have stigmatized
fucking
drinking
not.
alcohol.
All
We
three
absolutely have. Do you not think we
I
have
know
had
about that.
program after program,
Wick.
right? Like
I think-
stigmatizing drinking, stigmatizing overconsumption of alcohol.
What?
We've done this through
No,
media.
no.
We've done this
Wick,
through.
Wick,
Especially when you're young.
Wick, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about when you're saying that there are programs to help people not overdrink. That's not stigmatizing drinking. You're talking about programs to help people who are addicts. That's not the same as stigmatizing drinking.
Yeah, so
I
I
think
put.
it's pretty
stigmatizing-
prevalent with drinking.
So
I
this
think
is born
Alcohol
out-
is not stigmatized.
There is
Please stop.
research about this of like we have some research to at least show or demonstrate like how do you get people to recover, or like what is a motivation of change, especially for alcoholics. I put at least one research link in the chat of like shame is not an appropriate motivator for alcoholics. If anything, it leads to regression.
Do you think we have stigmatized drinking alcohol, at least to some degree, at least more than we have
I think
before?
I think we stigmatize
I
the
think
bad
we-
outcomes of alcohol, but in general, people are like, yeah, drink up.
I think we stigmatized drinking a lot during Prohibition, and then it was revoked. It was
that's what I'm saying.
like
Once they had it,
Prohibition
drink,
was
buddy,
tried.
let's
We
go.
literally made it like illegal, and then we like went back on it.
Sure,
Well,
but that's.
I mean,
Go ahead,
Think
Ginger.
of it. No, I just think of it from like the dare perspective. That didn't stop anybody from doing drugs. It literally told them where they could get drugs and what the drugs did for them. Like that's
It was not the best idea.
everybody
Dare
in
literally
junior
taught
high.
me which drugs I wanted
Yeah,
to
everybody
do.
in junior high was joking about dare, and you'd walk around with your dare shirt as
I
a
agree.
joke because it helps
Yeah.
you
Drugs
figure out
anyways.
what drug. Like you'd put a dare bumper sticker on your car as a joke because it's like this is so
100%.
stupid.
I agree.
You know, so
but
it's like
we have again more than we have before in previous generations stigmatized being an alcoholic. We have.
Stigmatizing being an
I get it.
alcoholic is not the same as stigmatizing consumption of alcohol. Literally,
It
Wick,
does
when
have a correlation.
No, Wick, I am for stigmatizing sexual
Katie,
predators. That's not the same as stigmatizing the kink. This is so... I love you. This is
I don't think she does.
bad.
Yeah, I don't think she does either, but that's okay. Again, I want to bring it back to the sexual kink. So thank you for that.
I bet you do.
Right? Again, age play is the example I'm using. I think we should stigmatize it. I think as a society, age play in the one direction. I don't care if you want to pretend to be a geriatric, 80-year-old walking with a cane.
What about geriatric with Alzheimer's?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
I can't
that's a
help it.
different
The
question.
shame came out of me. I was like, that's disgusting.
Yeah, it's weird, right? But I don't think it does harm in the same way, even though the Alzheimer's thing is a point, and I'll have to think about that more. But yes, I think the sexualization of being a child is something that society should crucify me all you want for this take. Crucify me all you want for this take, but yes, I think sexualizing being a child is bad, and we should stigmatize it. Call me crazy.
So to try and bridge the gap here, I would only agree with the assumption that it has a correlation with children being harmed. Or I guess the adults harming themselves in the activities. Let's assume a parallel that the thing I brought up earlier, like hair pulling or something like that, right? Assuming that the normalization of hair pulling during sexual activities resulted in people walking up and pulling people's hair in unconsensually or something like that, then I would shame that activity and the normalization of it inside of sexual acts. I don't necessarily say I haven't seen any correlation with that, but in the case of age play, if that was the case, I would shame it as well. If we are assuming, I'm not sure we know. Do we know? I don't think there's. I don't think it's
don't
proven.
know. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Okay. So with us not knowing, I'm assuming Wick would be like, "Hey, if you're
I'm
like,
pointing out a potential problem.
Yes, Wick
Yeah,
let me.
going to
You
be
can. You,
unscientific.
Katie, you will not
outweighs
speak
the
for me.
reward, is what Wick is saying.
Let
right?
me let Wick say what Wick is saying. I'm saying that I don't have a study. I don't have a study showing this is
No,
harmful.
you don't.
But I can say, hey, the potential, the fact that this might be harmful is enough for me personally.
Yep, the risk outweighs
the risk,
the reward.
right? I don't. Why is this a thing? $10 from Temperate Takes to say shaming does not fix pathology. Therapy does not fix pathology. Please stop weaponizing psychology if you don't know what you're talking about, for the love of God. $2 from Adarius. Reading this comment is my kink. You're welcome. Okay.
Wait, I say if you're engaging in really like violent kinks and stuff, I feel like you should probably be getting therapy on the side so that you like kind of understand why you're engaging in that type of activity and how you can engage in that activity without being harmful to other people.
I think I said that earlier. Of like, you can label things unhealthy, and conflating immoral and unhealthy is a bad conflation. I have no problem
I'm not saying
labeling.
it's immoral.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why
I am.
Exactly.
I'm saying that getting off on beating people up is immoral.
Yes, Wick, but you haven't stated why. Like your entire argument for age play. To be fair,
because if you are getting off on hurting others, you're a bad person. I don't know why I have to explain this.
Wait, does that others include animals?
No, shut up, Corey.
Non-human animals?
No, animals aren't a thing.
I don't
Aren't
think that's a bad person. I don't know if having like if you why would you say they're a bad person? Do you think they have a mental illness, or like what is it because they're putting harm on other people?
Yes, because when you're hurting other people, it's wrong to do, and if you're enjoying hurting other people, it's especially wrong. Did I miss your super chat? Zephyr, I'm sorry. Can you repeat what it was? I'll read it. Oh, $2
Okay,
thoughts on
Wick.
the Alabama Hot Pocket. Google it. Don't Google it, gang. Okay.
Is the
Wait,
if the other
Googling
person
it.
wants to be
Google it.
harmed, is it immoral?
Yes.
Or is it just the
Yes.
act?
Even if someone asks you to cut off my finger and beat me up, it's wrong to do it. It's wrong to say yes to them.
Okay, but
Should've
what
not
if they're
Googled
working?
that.
What if they're working through some type of trauma and they're getting therapy and they're in a consensual relationship and they're working through it, and they eventually get to the point where they're not beating people up to not? Is that okay?
If they're getting them getting therapy is good, but me indulging in their like, look, I'm not a therapist. If a
Clearly.
professional medical doctor, if their prescription, right, is you need to engage in this and wean yourself on it, so okay, in that circumstances, sure, but that's not how this plays out in life. Right? You understand that?
Ooh.
This isn't how it works out on the ground. What happens on the ground is someone comes in and says, hey, you're in a relationship, and they say, hey, I really want you to beat the shit out of me because this is my kink. Yeah, you tell the person no.
Well,
Wait,
Wait. Hey, 𝕵𝖍𝖎, you gave him his point. Please, just let me.
Sure. Yeah, no, go for it.
I will let you. Point. I will let you feed him more talking points later. Okay.
Listen, I'm playing the sides I want to play. Go
I
for
just
it.
ask questions. That's all. I'm not part of this. I'm just asking questions.
Wick, I dare you to give me the line that you have, and I will make a hypothesis that your line about because you don't believe that all harm is. For example, my Twitter behavior and your Twitter behavior harms us both, right?
It doesn't harm me.
You called me a bitch yesterday, but I kind of liked it. So.
But you wouldn't say that type of harm shouldn't be engaged in. So
first
clearly
of all,
you have a line.
It doesn't harm me.
Wick, shut the fuck up.
I'm just...
Clearly you have a line, right? And I would venture a guess that your line is right about what a normie middle-aged Democrat from America would say, right? For no particular reason. So please explain a logical framework for your line and not just this is how I was raised and these are my feelings.
Okay, I will do my best.
I believe in you, bro.
Cause permanent, that has a high enough risk of causing permanent physical injury is my line. Of that makes you a bad person.
Does injury include in the brain?
Like emotional
Like
trauma?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
I
think
it should.
trauma would count.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you assess that potential, do you use anything like data for it, or is it just like I feel like this?
I gotta be
potential?
honest. My intuition of having seen what happens when someone gets beat the shit out of has led me to use. So no, I don't have a study on if beating the shit out of someone and punching their face and breaking their teeth can result in permanent physical injury, but I just know it's true.
No. I'm talking about the age play. I'm sorry. Are you okay with age play now?
No, I'm not.
Wait, can
You're not. Okay, so what's your line there?
My line there is the potential risk of causing
Okay, so when you assess
huge
potential,
societal harm.
How do you do that? Is it about your feelings again?
Partially, yes, and I don't think that's
Okay.
wrong to say.
My man.
Partially, yes, and that's not wrong.
Yes, it's not wrong. It's the right answer. It's literally the right answer. We don't have evidence enough to prove either position. It's the only right answer. Is that he just believes that given that what we have, which isn't sufficient, we should probably err on the side of caution. It's the correct answer.
Lady.
So
Yes.
I'm curious.
But you're also emotional for agreeing with the idea that we should.
I just want to say that age play is being like misrepresented here. The majority of what we're talking about is like DDLG. Like it's not age play. Age play is more so for people who are in a dom sub relationship and they can switch roles if the dom is significantly younger than the sub versus the sub being older than the dom. That's what age play is.
Okay, I'm speaking.
Actually.
Maybe I'm using the wrong term, and that's my fault. Right?
I
I'm
just wanna-
talking
I
about
just
the
wanna,
daddy-daughter
right.
little girl stuff.
Right.
right?
I just want to say I'm very glad that now we want to be very specific about what we were talking about.
Now, if I'm
and that
using the-
age play means exactly this.
Yo!
We need to be very specific with our definitions, and we can't conflate things and just use colloquial terms. Now, let's
no,
be very
Corey, it's just about what Wick thinks kinks are. Wick, I have a question. Should we stigmatize women calling men daddy because it might raise the potential of harm to children?
Good question.
Men get off on that. I know men get off on that.
I'd have to think about that more. I am not entirely against it, but I don't know if that alone is enough, because daddy, daughter, little girl is not, as I understand it. And if I'm ignorant on this, I'm ignorant on this, and you can call me out. But it's not simply calling someone daddy. That's not what it entails, right? So I think that simple variable alone wouldn't be enough. That's my instinct here. Yeah.
Yeah, to go into the DDLG, it's more so like it's cosplaying as a younger version of yourself. You're cosplaying, and I'm not saying that it's okay. I'm just saying that it's you're cosplaying as like a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old or maybe even a 13 or 14-year-old, but it's like,
so I knew just an anecdotal Andy here.
What if
just
you're cosplaying as a really hot 16-year-old?
Stop. Anecdotal Andy here. I knew of a couple who was involved in this, and the woman in the situation, she had her LG persona that she'd adopt, right? And she would get out coloring books and crayons and talk in a baby voice and dress up and that kind of baby voice. And that was
kind of baby voice, daddy?
and be a brat, right? She called it being bratty to her daddy and things like that, and she would get really into it. And
it
was gross. It was gross and it was shameful. And they there's something wrong with that. Yes. Yes, there's something wrong with that. If that's a sexual gratification thing, there's something wrong with it. Why am I getting so much pushback on this? Why?
Yeah, because you can.
Well, I think it would just be the assumption. I think it would be the assumption that it's going to carry over into harming children, right?
Well, it did carry over in this anecdote. It did carry over to other aspects of their life that caused problems for the couple.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't. Well, I don't. Even if it potentially harmed their relationship or something, it could be unethical. But what I would say is, like, for me at least, let's imagine a world. Okay, let's all go into a fantasy world where that daddy, daughter, little girl stuff never negatively affects children in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't. It's just strictly to the bedroom. That's it. Like, I don't know, like spanking or some shit like that. That's pretty mid that everybody considers to be like not that big of a deal. Like, it doesn't result in some negative effect on the world. What's the problem?
I don't think there is a problem in that case.
Okay.
But that's the thing.
Great.
We don't live in that fantasy world. And so
you don't know if we don't live in
exactly. We don't know. So I think the assumption that these people are doing something wrong is just as bad as assuming that they're doing something right.
I have a question, and this is kind of weird.
Before you ask your question, $10 from Temperate Takes. I gotta make my money, gang. Is everyone on the panel in favor of universal health care so everyone has access to psychological care? Serious question, because many mentally ill live untreated because they can't afford it.
As a Canadian, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
An American who moved to Canada, absolutely, yes.
Canada. Sorry, I got excited.
Great country.
Ginger, go ahead.
So, let me try to remember. Okay, so I have a question for the panelists. If there is a couple getting into DDLG, and let's say they have like even like a bedroom just dedicated to it, like she's got all her stuffed animals and stuff, or he's got whatever, doesn't matter. But they have kids. They have young kids. Do you think that there's and I don't know each way. I'm just saying, do you think that there could be a negative aspect towards that?
Are the kids like watching their mom act like a 6-year-old? Like, do they ever see it? Do they ever see her with her crayons?
They know that there's a room specifically that has a bunch of toys and stuff that they can't go into.
A special
you know, like,
Yo, like I'm cringing inside. Like this is just like this is like a nightmare scenario.
I'm literally asking because this is a scenario that I've actually seen. So I'm just wondering, like, is this something? Yeah, no.
Isn't this the same as having? Isn't this the same as like when a couple has like a sex dungeon and a child knows that there's some weird stuff in the sex?
Yeah, don't go in there.
Look, my point is, I think it's irresponsible parenting if you're going to have that in your house and your child is aware of it. You can have your own room. The fact that a child knows what's in the room or that they are allowed in the room is not appropriate. And I'm not saying that it's not appropriate because we have I think it can be done more or less ethically, but I'm fine with just like
what conditions can it be done ethically, Katie?
Shut up, Wick. But in the same way that you don't want your kids to find your vibrators in your sock drawer, you also don't want your kids to be in your sexual play.
I want you to answer my question,
don't
Katie.
want them to find your drugs either.
Real quick, I want you to answer my question, Katie. In what way can a child, a 6-year-old child, be introduced to mommy and daddy's sex dungeon in an ethical way?
That's not really what I said. I said that, like, in Ginger's example, the fact that a child knows that there's a room she's not allowed in with toys in it is still not a big issue for me, as long as she doesn't know what happens in that room. I would prefer if that wouldn't be the case, because I feel bad for the kid. She wants the toys. So, like, that would suck. But, like, it's still not sexual, right? What bothers me is when there's a certain level of exposure to sexuality that children should not experience with their parents. And if you're not a responsible parent about that, then that's really fucked up. That's all there is.
Yeah, Wick, to clarify something based off of your positions. So, yeah, you don't like, obviously, people even consensually getting off on beating up someone else.
Yes.
So let's say there's an individual. And they get off on simulated, as the term is, like on simulated torture porn. Just at home, they get off on that, and no one's being harmed. Are you okay with that?
Less wrong, but still wrong.
Oh, can you tell me why?
Sure, because again, same reason. I think you and I would both agree. AI child porn, right? No kid is harmed in it, but it is normalizing a behavior, right? And if you defend one, you kind of have to defend the other. If you defend one, you kind of have to defend the other.
To be clear, we don't have the data either to show that it doesn't increase. So
but the risk.
I think what Brother Wick is saying is that the risk outweighs the reward.
Yes.
I agree with him. Is that it normalizing the behavior makes.
Brother Wick is not saying that. You're saying that.
Yes.
Brother Wick is influenced by his fifis, and he doesn't actually care about.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I am influenced by my fifis. That's not wrong.
Yes, it's not wrong because we don't have conclusive data.
I'm talking to Daddy, okay? Like, shut the fuck up. I get that you're making that point. It's a valid point. And, like, there's discussions on that. We can talk research, we can talk this, whatever. Wick is simply like, I think this does harm. How does it does harm, Wick? Well, I
think the potential risk of it doing harm is the harm. That's the harm. The potential risk that may incur by normalizing this thing. And simulated torture porn, right? Again, I don't know this, but the risk of it in the data is mixed on this. Let me finish.
I thought being interrupted was your kink.
Is interrupting me, but come on. Like, the risk of exposing someone to simulated torture porn, and that reaches a point where they're desensitized to it, so the simulation of it is no longer enough. And so, because they've been pathologized into this, or maybe pathology is the wrong word, but this has become a compulsion, and it becomes a compulsion, so they seek out more extreme versions of this, and so no longer simulations can satisfy them, so they have to get the real thing. The risk of that happening, and it is a real risk, is enough for me to say, hey, let's not do this.
Okay, so you agree we should stop first shooter video games, right? Because they might normalize people shooting humans.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true.
No. Wait.
Rap music gotta go.
Wait, that you don't know that's not true. It could happen. There's potential here. What do you mean?
I think
I'll engage with that.
Go ahead, Irrelevant. I can engage with it, but I want to hear.
Do that anyways, regardless of the video game.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting argument, but that's not Wick's argument. So, Wick,
Okay.
since there's potential, right?
Because the level of
this is
potential.
normalizing a behavior. Like Irrelevant is sitting all
Okay.
day on his computer shooting people on the computer, and then you don't know if he's gonna go and like shoot a
Such
woman
a
in real life.
terrible
You don't know
person.
that.
You're such a terrible
Irrelevant,
person.
I don't know what.
There's potential.
Irrelevant hangs out with
And my
Darius, so I don't know what he's
my-
capable
my
of.
feelings-
I'm no
my
longer
feelings
sure
are
what he is capable of. But let me answer your question and engage with your point. If we have research on this, we do. We absolutely have
we do.
research on this that shows
Yes, we do.
there isn't. If you can come out with me with research that says
Would you
AI
like that
child
research?
porn or AI torture porn is not having any effect, then okay, maybe I'll
Wait.
change my mind. But until
You
you
don't
can
know-
do that, until you can
If I
do
can-
that, because
if I
we
can
like to
provide
use
you
these things. Let
research.
me finish. And we like to do this thing where, like, oh, this thing and this thing is treated in a certain way, and it's close to this thing, so we're going to treat them the same. I don't think we can. I think that the differences matter here, and I think that there is a difference. Like, if there's a first-person shooter where someone was getting off sexually to the first-person shooter, that's a problem, and that person should not be doing first-person shooters. If every time they kill someone in a video game, they're getting sexual gratification, yes, that person should not be
Okay.
doing
So,
first-person
Wick,
shooters. Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
really glad you
It's Call
said
of
that.
Duty.
I'm really glad you said that because first of all, that just shows that maybe you were brought up Catholic. Something with your sexuality is all like you have a specific thing for sexuality.
Black Ops.
But whatever. My point is just this: if I provided data that suggests that video games make people more likely to act aggressively, would that help you? Change
There
your
is data.
opinion
There
on
is
video
data to that,
games?
and I think that yes,
Oh.
that we should be mindful of this. But aggressively is doing a lot of work there. Like, aggressive can be good in certain situations. Like, we want aggressive in certain situations, right? That's not necessarily 100% bad. What situations do we want people to torture each other to get off on it?
So, Wick, since you understand,
I want you to answer my question.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Sure, I know you weren't listening. What situations do you like? Because we understand that being aggressive in certain situations could be a good thing. Under what situations
Oh my
is
god,
torturing someone to get off a good thing?
Okay. Sorry. First of all, I need to raise my ableist counter because you just made me call you dumb. But okay. So is your argument that sometimes being more aggressive, that there's utility in
Being more
video
aggressive,
games?
yes.
Okay.
Like on a panel, you want to
I
be
can
aggressive
engage
to
with
get
that.
in.
Oh,
You're
I can't
aggressive,
engage
Katie.
with this.
Okay.
I
I'm
can't-
not aggressive,
no.
and I still
Yeah.
love it.
No. Wick, let me tell you this. I am humbled by this great take of yours, and I'm so humbled. I take the L. I can't engage with this level of masterfulness. Okay.
No.
So
I'll
I'm
convert
just
that to a-
backing down.
I'll convert that to a
Okay.
dub. Okay, so like you asked the question of like, so what is the utility? Like, there's some utility to aggressiveness, and so like, what's the utility of people consensually beating themselves up and getting
Beating other people up. Yeah.
Yeah, consensually beating other people up and getting
Oh, and to be clear, no. What is it to torturing others to get off, right?
Yeah, okay, sure. I'll even go.
Because
So,
again, AI torture porn. We're not assuming consent in this torture, are we?
well, are we talking about between two individuals, two humans, or someone just watching?
The reason
simulated...
you asked me why I was against AI torture porn, and I again said I don't have data on it, so it's my fifis, but the risk of it becoming something that they are desensitized to and then have to seek out more extreme things and eventually take it from the AI realm to the real realm is so much that I think that we should stigmatize it and not let it happen if we can stop it.
I actually. Oh, sorry.
Oh no! Please engage.
I thought that you were done. I didn't mean to.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll finish then. I don't mean to hog my own panel here.
Your panel, go for it.
Yeah.
Trying to understand.
But again, the difference here, right? What is the utility in that? Is my question to you.
What's the utility of?
What's the utility, right? What would be the utility, right?
So if the argument's
and
utility,
normalizing people getting off to torturing other people, what would be the utility there?
Okay, so if your argument boils down to utility, which I think it does, it's a fair assessment, then what's the utility of like anal sex then?
Well, utility also has to be rest with harm. I don't think the harm of anal sex is that big of a deal in most cases.
But you'd agree there's no utility there, at least from my understanding of your depth.
Sure, maybe
the
not.
utility is pleasure for people who enjoy that.
No?
Well, and someone getting off from that's gratification.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the
but it's
only
weighed against the
utility
risk.
to
Yeah, again,
only
but
utility
like,
But it's weighed against the
yes, if someone is
And
pleasuring
conservatives
this,
feel
like getting
the
pleasure from
risk of
anal sex,
normalizing anal
it's
sex.
substantively different and not the same as someone getting pleasure from torturing another person. These are
so can
different things.
This is like someone saying that.
Yes, it
whatever,
is. Yeah. Is it the same? Are you
Yeah,
treating these things
apples
the
and
same?
oranges are different things, but you can, let's say, compare their skin color. Like this, like. So
They're both fruit,
what is the substantive difference between those two scenarios of, let's say, anal sex, someone getting sexual gratification, or even just like masturbation, of just like masturbation alone? How about imagining in their mind torture porn?
Again, it's the desensitization. There comes a point, right, where imagination is no longer enough, and you have to seek it out in real life.
Okay, the problem that I have
When you
with
say
that, though,
it's sorry.
the problem that's fine. The problem with that I have with that scenario, or that saying Wick, though, is that people watch vanilla porn and they don't escalate to certain things. There are certain people who are going to escalate, but they would escalate no matter what. That's the issue. It has nothing to do with what they're watching. They would escalate regardless.
I don't think it's a no matter what or regardless. I think you're pointing to two binaries, and I don't think it's a binary. I think it's a spectrum. I do believe that there are certain people, right? If they aren't exposed to certain things, won't engage in certain behaviors, right? I absolutely believe that. We know this is true, right? People, is your argument that media doesn't influence people?
Thank you.
Okay, I do feel that, of course, media influences people
So
to a certain extent.
if it
But
if
I
it
feel like
influences
if you
people,
don't have already that inclination, like that, it's the same thing as like people can drink alcohol and be friend and be okay with alcohol, but then there's a person who has an addiction issue that drinks alcohol and becomes addicted to it. It's the same. It's the same circumstance. Not everybody is going to lead down that path.
But just because not everyone will do that and it won't be harmful for everyone doesn't mean we can't or shouldn't stigmatize something that we recognize that the risk of this becoming even 1, 2, 3%
Well, again,
more,
but that's when you,
more
but that's when
normalized
you're,
being
but
a
that's
fucking
when you're,
problem.
but that's when you're stigmatizing being an alcoholic versus stigmatizing actually drinking.
Again, if you stigmatize actually drinking, it does kind of help the second part too. Like there's downstream effects.
Yeah. Wick, I needed time to think about your great point, but I finally got it countered. Thank
Sure,
God,
but I want to
okay?
get other people in too, so it's not just interrogate Wick Day. Allison.
Why? You have a horrible point.
No!
You deserve to be grilled.
Because I want to give Rora, Allison, Julie, Irrelevant time to speak as well.
Okay.
We'll start with Allison. We'll go to Rora, then we'll go to Julie, then we'll go to Irrelevant.
Let's go.
What?
This is kind of like a question in sexology, because you have mostly men who claim that, and they say, if I would not have been exposed to this porn, I would not have this sexual proclivity. And then you have people who turn around and say, you would not have found that porn if you did not have that sexual proclivity. So it's like chicken or the egg comes first. Like, did they have this inclination that just led them to accidentally stumble upon the torture porn? Or did the torture porn like ignite something that would not have otherwise been ignited? I do not think we know.
Well, yes, and because we don't know, the risk and potential risk.
Your panel.
Err on the side of caution.
I got a question.
Don't worry, Wick. I'll say the exact same thing when it comes around to me.
Don't people have certain genetics that aren't like it's like environmental factors. Everyone has genes within them or whatever, and then you engage with that environment and that makes that gene like open up, and then suddenly it's like people who may be schizophrenic but they're not dealing with the symptoms, and then they do mushrooms, and then now they're dealing with crazy schizophrenic symptoms. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay.
Is it not like you might have that general like genetic proclivity or whatever, and then
I'm gonna read some more super chats real quick, then we're gonna engage with that. $5 from Testicle Johnson. Calling a man daddy in the bedroom is creepy and weird. Be a normal person and call them father. From 𝕍𝖎, Civil War reenactments are bringing back slavery. And 𝕍𝖎 again for $2. D&D has all these goblins ambushing people everywhere. Okay, thank you. Keep giving me money, gang. This is based. It's my kink. But anyway.
Money!
Rora. Well, let's engage with what Julie said.
Wick
and then
is a
Rora.
sugar baby confirmed.
True.
Yes.
Hey, you called him a baby.
consented.
That's almost age play. That's normalizing. You're hurting children.
True.
Okay, that's not my feelings.
True.
You can't prove it's not true.
2
You can't
euros.
prove it.
2 euros from 𝕲𝖎𝖏. 𝕲𝖎𝖏. I don't know how to say your name. I'm sorry. If you need extreme kinks, you're probably just bad at sex. Maybe.
But that's a take.
That's crazy.
That's a
That's
take.
actually crazy. I disagree
That's a
hard.
take.
I disagree hard.
It's interesting.
Rora, go ahead.
I think Wick is erring on the side of caution and just going from the standpoint of harm reduction. I just simply think that we can or cannot prove that these things will happen based on people being introduced to porn. And I think overall, he's just trying to say that if we reduce the instances of this happening, then maybe we're going to overall reduce the harm. And I'm going to be, again, anecdotal Andy and say I have had sex with people who were super into a lot of pretty wild, interesting kinks. And as they had more normal sex, they got way less interested in those kinks. And I believe that's a situation where maybe they were being introduced to more and more, and they weren't having a lot of real life sex, so they were desensitized. And I think that having a healthy sexual relationship helped with the compulsions of seeking out more and more stimulation via the internet. And I also want to just say that Corey kind of changed my standpoint a little bit on kink shaming, because he mentioned shaming an alcoholic and it not being productive. Well, I used to be 220 pounds. I lost 90 pounds. And one of the biggest factors in me losing weight was if I slipped up or ate something bad, I didn't shame myself, because when I felt shame, I would say, fuck it and do it more. So that's all I wanted to say.
That's wonderful. Yay.
That is wonderful.
W.
Irrelevant. Go ahead. And then.
Yeah, so I would say well, hold on, brother. I would say that I'm in the same position. Hold on, man. I'm in the same position.
Animal out there.
Yeah. I'm in the same position as Wick for most everything except for the stigmatizing part, for the exact reason that Rora brought up, which was really great. Okay, so I believe I like to err on the side of caution. I understand how Katie is getting to a separate position here, because they err on the side of autonomy,
Agency,
right?
autonomy,
autonomy,
freedom,
right? The availability
Americanism.
for
Yes.
people to freely act, based with their on their own volition. I, however, think that there are certain specific actions, such as the extreme ones, DDLG, and things like that, where I'm like, okay, or like torture stuff, where I'm like, okay, maybe we should probably not do stuff like this. But there's, again, going to come back to it, there is that line. So I think at the end of the day, it's about risk versus reward, right? The outcomes of these actions, we don't know if it's going to result in more people doing it, or if it's just going to stay at like porn, or stay as just like a fantasy. So probably the best thing to do would be to err on the side of caution, in my opinion.
At what point is it okay to rob someone of their agency? There's just an interesting question that I just thought of.
But there are points where we do, right? Like, apparently,
course.
Katie
Corey,
robs
I
me
wait
of the
up.
agency to talk uninterrupted all the time. Like, she says she believes in freedom, except for the freedom of Wick to speak.
Not yours.
That is not the freedom that she respects or anything. But
Lock 'em
Katie,
up.
go ahead.
Okay, so you know how I said that you had a brilliant point, which I didn't mean, but like I thought about it. And since we're just allowed to go based on our feelings and just make up shit, right? Or like go off of like psychological theories. So I think that in the same vein that you say that people might get desensitized and stuff like that, I'm going to counter and say that maybe giving people who have really harmful kinks an outlet that it like AI simulated porn or even AI child porn, if maybe
You're
that's
okay
going
with
to make
AI
them
child
less.
porn?
I'm not done talking.
I'm
So-
asking.
So it seems that maybe allowing people to have that outlet in a different way is going to reduce harm. Maybe someone who watches rape porn was going to rape someone real life, but they're watching rape porn, so they're not raping them. And you know what? You can say that's not true.
I can't
So-
trust someone with those impulses, though, to
Isn't-
keep it in their private home, though, right?
That's fine that you can't trust them. I'm just making the point that Wick's point was really like
It's a coin toss. It can go either way.
Yeah, it is.
Yes,
it is
it's
one-sided.
meaningless.
Yeah.
It's not a
And
good
Witch
point.
is trying to be cautious, right?
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
isn't
But
rape,
he might be
isn't
making it
Thank you for
worse.
the sub, Rabbit. And gang, if you're liking this content, if you're enjoying this content, feel free to follow the channel if you haven't yet. Like the content, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, and throw me some sub and bits. That would be great. Okay, Julie, go ahead.
I liked it so much I would force Wick to bring me on.
True.
my question might be dumb, but isn't rape porn in of itself like a bad thing? Like, isn't it bad for people to get off to the idea of someone being raped?
Yes.
That's an interesting question.
Well,
immoral?
what exactly do you mean by that? Of like simulated? Like
It doesn't whatever, it's simulated or not, actuality or not. Isn't it bad?
No,
the
well,
idea of
that's- I
someone
think
getting
that-
off to
no,
someone
no, I
being
think there's a difference
forcefully-
No. There's a distinction.
there's
When
a
I say
distinction.
rape porn, I mean stage rape porn.
Yeah, simulated.
I don't mean actual rape. I don't
not-
mean like real
What if,
footage.
what if the
I am
person
not
watching it
walking on the
believes that it
street.
wasn't staged? What if they believe it's real? Isn't that the whole point? They need to believe it's real so they can get off. That's why they're watching rape porn.
Okay, so that's
No.
that's a little bit different, but like, yeah, it's difference between, as Katie pointed out, someone
just
watching
asking
it and
questions.
it's simulated. Yeah, no, these are all valid
Don't
questions and good
apologize.
questions. Like, the more questions, the better. But there's the distinction between, like, yeah, if I'm like walking down an alley and I see a sexual assault occur, and then I don't intervene, I just get off on it. That's different than me watching on my screen and there's some sort of implicit consent. Well, presumed.
How do you know
because
there's
implicit
consent though? How do you know? It's just on
Yeah.
your screen. You don't
Well,
know.
okay, we can get into, you know,
Okay, so
coercion and
Julie-
sex work and all that stuff, but that's like an entire different
Yeah,
story.
I'm just curious though.
Wait. No,
Before
wait.
you go.
It's not a different story. This is a great quiz. This is W Press.
But we
So,
know-
Julie, just to make clear, I do agree with you that it is 100% unethical and immoral, in my opinion, to watch rape porn if you're not sure it's acting. If you're not sure it's acting and you watch rape porn, you watch snuff porn, you watch any type of porn or any type of activity where you are not sure consent was given, then I am I would say you're a bad person.
I feel like
Why?
Wait, can I very quickly?
Yeah,
So
go, yeah.
I was dating this guy. We went on one date, and then he decided to tell me that he has a WhatsApp group with his friends where they send each other videos of women being put into like plastic bags and they're vacuuming
Turn
the
it
air
off.
out.
Turn it off. Turn it off. I don't like that.
Yes. And I was like, so is that stage? And he's like, no, it's 100% real.
Yeah, I don't
I'm-
like that.
I got up and I left and I never talked to that person again. Like there's no, I was horrified by that for weeks. Okay.
Yeah, but-
like it was wrong that he told me that. It's wrong that he's doing that. It's wrong that those things exist. What I'm talking about and what I believe Corey is talking about
What if it
is
was
strictly in the
consensual?
Is that
concept.
kink shaming? Did you just
Wait,
kink shame?
yeah, why is it wrong?
Yeah. What if it's
That's not-
consensual? What if the woman consented?
I literally said that she
Wait,
did.
no.
Oh, I
yeah,
misheard.
okay,
That's my bad. Wait, that's my bad. Everyone shut up. That's my bad. I misheard you. Continue, Katie. Everyone shut up.
No. What? But again, you would say if they consented, it'd be okay.
Wick, I asked the guy if it's fake, and he said no, it's real.
Yeah, but
So-
he's asking if it was
It
like if the women consented to
Yeah,
be
even if it
Okay.
was real.
those
Let
bags.
me.
If they
So I'll
consented.
explain.
Yeah, I want to hear the
'cause
rest of what she has to say.
Yeah. So as I said, if you don't know if they consented or not, first of all, even if they consented, it's illegal, right? But if we're talking morally, he didn't know if they consented or not. So I have no idea if they're consented. I
Wait, so
don't
did
know.
they die? Did they die?
Yes.
Sheesh,
Yes.
goddamn.
Okay,
I
but
thought it
okay,
was
so that was
temporary
yeah,
thing.
no,
Yeah.
you made it sound like it was asphyxia, not snuff.
Death.
You're
No.
talking about snuff porn.
Yeah. That's what I'm
That's fucked
talking
up.
about.
Okay,
Okay.
can I hear why you think it's bad though?
Wait, there's a lot of points right now. Think what is bad.
The snuff porn. Why watching it is bad.
Okay, so my entire argument hinges on the concept of autonomy and consent. Without autonomy and consent, I don't have a leg to stand on. So consent is very viable. Now, in terms of stuff that are illegal that you consent to, there's like a legal element to that. But if you watch snuff porn, real snuff porn, it's not fake, and you don't know if it's fake or not, that is immoral because there isn't, we are unaware of the concept of consent, which as far as I'm concerned means consent wasn't reached. If you're confused about whether something is consensual or not, it's not consensual.
So you would also be against...
Wait.
Oh, go on. Irrelevant, go.
Okay, so the viewer, so you would say in any sexual act of any kind, even the most vanilla sex, if I don't know explicitly that both parties are consenting, it is unethical to watch that porn.
Oh, good question.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I think watching a lot of porn is kind of problematic, because the concept of consent in porn is in question. How much consent is actually being had.
Yeah, it's an anti-porn take,
so
which is basically
that wouldn't that's not necessarily to mean I would say this person is a horrible, immoral person. But I do think that people are way more comfortable engaging and consuming behaviors that they are not sure about consent that was had there.
Isn't that kind of what happens, like, outside of porn? Isn't that kind of what happens when people introduce their kinks to other people and they don't really have the education they need to be able to, like, involve themselves in that type of situation? They end up doing things that traumatize themselves. Because they're horny in the moment,
consensual non-consent. A lot of people end up,
oh god, I didn't agree to this.
Like, to Katie's point, because issues with consent. It's not necessarily the kink, but consent.
No, she said the issue that the kink brings in those issues of consent.
No, it doesn't.
No,
it doesn't.
It really does. It does. Because
No, just stop. Everyone stop. Julie, can you elaborate on that?
What do you mean?
You made the statement that the kink itself brings in issues of consent. Can you elaborate?
Well, so if you're fucking someone and they have some sort of type of kink that you've never really heard of before, and they bring it up while you're in the midst of fucking, you don't really know what's going on. You're just trying to fucking get off, and they bring it up, and you're like, okay, let's do it. And then suddenly you're getting beat, and you didn't realize that that's what it meant. That can be a problem.
Not okay. That's not.
No, I agree. It's not okay. I don't think necessarily people should be shamed for having kinks in general. I think people should be shamed for trying to make their kinks is something public outside of a sphere where you're sitting down with someone and being open with them, rather than you're in the midst of having sex and you're trying to force it on someone to get off.
But that's not you bringing your kink into the public space. That's just you sexually assaulting someone.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If you're gonna have if you have a really like violent, aggressive kink, it should be something you talk about with someone before you're having sex with them, not in the middle of sex.
Okay, Julie, I know you said that you're really into vanilla sex, so this might not work with you.
Vanilla cream. Sorry.
Okay, I'm not shaming you. I'm just like I'm putting a hypothetical here. So what I'm saying is that when you're like doing the caveat of like very violent, extreme kinks, blah 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 blah, you can have be having sex and then a guy try to put their dick up your asshole. If you're a woman, you've probably been there.
Yep.
That is sexual assault, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think it's those people's kinks that they don't really have in check, where they feel comfortable enough to put it upon a person instead of talking to them about it. They feel comfortable enough to put it upon them.
It's a consent issue.
That's not a kink thing.
No, I know. But I'm saying if you have that type of kink, you need to sit down with them and talk to them about it before. Sorry. I'm shutting up.
Don't let Katie silence you. Don't let Katie silence you. I will protect you against Katie.
I'm letting my kink out right now. Katie can yell at me.
Okay.
Okay, so
I want
to shut up, girl.
There's
wonderful.
quite a few people. Quite a few people have their hands up. I want to go to Allison first. Irrelevant, the ginger.
But I wanted Katie to yell at me. Okay. Anyways.
Okay. The problem with snuff is consent. So, the case earlier, Sharon 𝕵𝖎𝖙 enthusiastically consented to her own murder. If that would have been filmed, and in this hypothetical porn, her emails flash up where she's like, please murder me, I don't care if they find my body, please. And you know she consented to her murder is filmed, and then people watch it and jack off to it. Is that fine?
Fine by me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know about that one.
Because again, this is where we question when we rob someone of their agency, right?
Yeah, because let me walk you down this line. Okay, they do this. It's fine by you. And they're like, hey, I want more of this. Can anyone find me more of this? More of people consenting to be murdered so I can jack off while I'm watching it. It creates a market.
Many people get murdered. So
it creates a market.
Aren't you a capitalist, Wick? That's the market. The market speaks for itself. Can never be wrong.
Irrelevant was next. Irrelevant.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I didn't necessarily want to bring this up because this was something that I was going to bring up earlier, but it was kind of a bit off topic, which is that when you normalize this kind of thing, even in pornography or in interpersonal activities, we need to recognize how faulty people are when dealing with consent. So when we normalize things like DDLG or whatever, very, very, permanent lasting damage, whatever it might be, that we have a visceral response to, we need to recognize that we don't live in this world where there's going to be perfect consent. There's going to be a lot of coercion, a lot of it. And it's going to look like both parties are consenting, but one person's a little smooth, a little easy on the eyes, a little something like that. And it's probably going to result in somebody agreeing to something they didn't otherwise want to do. And so with that being the case, we should, again, err on the side of caution with normalizing certain behaviors that can have lasting negative effects on people like the brother Wick described.
I agree. Do you feel that way about vanilla sex, Irrelevant?
Yeah. To it, I think we all agree. Yeah. There is certain people need to be educated on certain about vanilla sex.
This.
However, hold on. However, I think that the consequences of vanilla sex are going to be less detrimental than something like, beating the shit out of somebody or DDLG or something like this. These things can have a lot more negative consequences in general.
Most cases of rape and sexual assault are not, I wouldn't call that vanilla and I wouldn't call that sex, but we're not talking about extreme kinks. Right. So again, I'm all on board with what you're saying.
We are talking about extreme kinks.
Yeah, we literally are, aren't we?
Okay. We're talking about snuff and plastic bags being put over our heads. And
to Relly's point.
Yeah, my point was about specifically extreme shit. I'm not saying like hair pulling, which I think is now getting into vanilla. Like it's pretty vanilla, right? I'm not saying stuff like that is like up there with snuff.
No, I'm not saying that you're okay. Listen to me, okay? Let's work through this together. Let's just work through. I asked you if
$2 from Kessill Johnson to say don't look up hot lunch on Urban Dictionary. 200 bits from Beckett to say the data suggests that violent video games actually have an 80% reduction in youth violence. They provide an outlet for aggression. Okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
Oh, they provide an outlet for aggression. So that seems to work in my benefit of like AI torture porn.
Are we going to believe some random chatter?
No, we're not, because it's not true, but whatever.
I looked it up.
So, Irrelevant.
I looked up Alabama Hot Pocket earlier. It's a mistake.
I looked it up too.
Oh, don't do it. He said not to. Anyway, go on. Katie has the floor. Katie has the floor. Katie, go ahead.
Let me talk. I am fine with if we're going to do this acknowledgement of like, hey, at the end of the day, we live in an imperfect world. A lot of people are uneducated about sex. They don't know what they're doing. There's going to be a lot of coercions. There's going to be a lot of issue. If you're going to recognize that, then I think we need to have a broader conversation of whether people should be having sex at all, because most harm doesn't happen from extreme kinks. It is happening from pretty vanilla sex, or what it is, which is rape and coercion and sexual assault.
Yeah, does anybody here disagree with the idea we should be having a very large society-wise conversation about how to consent and get informed consent out of your partner?
No. I agree with talking about consent. I thought the point you were making is that you were erring on the side of caution, that maybe we shouldn't engage in this thing because we agree that it's an imperfect world.
Maybe we shouldn't be as promiscuous? Yes. Maybe we shouldn't be as promiscuous as we are. Yes, absolutely.
Shut the fuck up. So all I'm saying is, if your point is we should just have a really broad conversation about how consent is made and proper education, I agree with you. I misunderstood your point. That's not what I thought you said. Sorry, I wasted your time.
Can you say that really, like, aggressive violent kinks are more traumatizing than, or is it? Would you say it's the same thing?
Than being raped?
Well, okay, it's like I don't want to say there's levels to being raped. There's like. Katie. Okay.
What are the levels to being raped, Julie?
I'm gonna get canceled. It's one thing to like. Oh God, this is not. I'm gonna get canceled. I don't even know if I can go down this road.
So you can go down this
road. Hey, look, this is just Katie. Stop.
With you because they are bad people.
I'm curious because I want to know, and you can look. I will never get at you for just giving your honest opinion here, right?
Well,
I
I
may
don't know if I
disagree
really
with
have this
you.
opinion. I would say other people definitely feel this way. I think a lot of
Okay.
people feel
I
that
just want
there's a
you to feel
difference
comfortable
between-
talking about it because this is what you've heard and what you think, and I think it's
Okay, well, I'll just say
fair
it.
to
I'll just say it.
open. Yeah,
I
please.
think I feel like there's a lot of people who believe that there's a difference between, like, say you're having like sex with your partner and you don't really want to, but you do it anyways because your partner wants to, even though you're not interested in it. And then there's a difference between that or like you're in an alleyway and someone drugs you and beats you and violently rapes you.
Of course there is.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
So, but that's not the discussion, Julie. The discussion is two people who are engaging consensually in hurting each other versus person who rapes another person.
But I think there's a lot of people who engage in these kinks who don't really know what they're about, who end up feeling like they've been assaulted or raped because they don't understand what's going on.
That's
exactly the problem.
I agree that people who irresponsibly engage in sex or kink shouldn't be irresponsibly engaging in sex or kink.
Okay, but you can't.
Let Julie finish. Julie, finish.
Well, I feel like part of the reason for me why I feel like shaming is not the right word because I don't want people to feel bad about engaging in their kinks, but I feel like there's a lot of instances where people who they don't really know what's going on and they don't really know what they're engaging in and they get caught up in something and then it traumatizes them and then it puts them down a road where they're engaging in those kinks as well and they traumatize other people.
Okay. Do you sorry, Ginger, do you want to say
Well,
something?
first of all, 300 more bits to point out that snuff porn has never been found, as in murders done on camera for distribution as a kink. That's from Beckett. So.
Thanks, Beckett.
Yep.
So
we're calling everything kink now.
My thing is that what Sad Kit Kat touched on is that a lot of people don't understand the ramifications of getting into certain things. There are people that say that will watch porn and be like, oh, I'm totally into BDSM, and like this happened to a friend of mine. She was like, so turns me on, you know, I'm totally cool with it, and I think this is great. She had her first experience where she told a man, yeah, and I'm totally down with it. And he's like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Smacked her as hard as he could across the face, got really rough with her, bruised her up a bit. She said no. He thought it was part of the thing. She didn't want to say, you know, she didn't want to make him out to be like a rapist or anything. This got really fucking out of hand. And that's not like a random occurrence. There are people who literally think that because they get off on it, watching it or whatever, that they are into it themselves. And
that happened to me. I was turned on to BDSM and I got tied up during sex and it was super traumatizing to me. I was like crying and trying to hide it until he finished, and then I was super traumatized afterwards, and I was turned on by the idea of it for a very long time. I thought I was consenting. So
I think that's another thing. I was reading this thing the other day. And I was reading this thing and it was talking about like casual sex today, like casual sex before you would just like kind of have vanilla sex, but I was reading this like post and there was like hundreds of women being like, yeah, I engaged with sex with this guy and he started choking me without asking me, or he started slapping me without asking me. He started doing all these things that would be considered a kink otherwise, but because they've become normalized within society, people are just doing them without asking because they think everyone's into it.
Can I talk?
Yes, sorry, Katie. I'm sorry, I love you.
No. Do not feed into this. Katie has been monopolizing. Stop. Katie has been monopolizing this, which is fine, but let's not pretend. Don't let her
you can monopolize
steamroll you. Yeah. It's okay if you guys talk too.
Yes.
I don't think you get it. Look at the
but Kit Kat, you allowing her to do that makes her feel like she can do that to everybody else, and that's a complete joke, by the way. That's the problem with consensual issues.
Sorry,
all right.
I'm putting my kinks on everyone else. You're right. I apologize. My bad.
We are in a hype train too, gang. We are in a hype train. So if you want to give me some money on Twitch, now would be the time to do it. Okay, with that. Katie, you can talk now, but then I want to hear from Allison too, and Corey.
So
Corey has been...
we can utilize what Ginger said as an example to how maybe Wick and Corey and Julie are fine with me having certain behavior, but that doesn't mean I have the same dynamic with the other people on the panel. And then I might get ahead of myself and allow that dynamic to exist with other people. And that's a flaw on me. It doesn't mean that there's something inherently wrong within the consensual dynamics I have with Corey or Wick or Julie. It means
we should
that
definitely shame Julie for it.
What did I do? Well, I'm getting dogpiled, bro. What?
See, now you're anti-shaming. Good.
So
yeah. I changed my mind.
So just to be very clear, there are big issues in the BDSM community. There are a lot of people who get into it. They land on people who are abusive and are sexual predators. That is not an issue with BDSM. That's an issue with abusive people within the BDSM community. If we're talking about prevalence here, what I'd like to point out is that in the same way that Ginger pointed out that a lot of people get themselves into stuff they're not really aware of, my point is that women and men who start to engage in sex, generally vanilla sex, non-kinky whatever sex, also experience this. If you talk, we're mostly women here, so we know that a lot of our first sexual experiences wasn't necessarily as consensual as we thought they were.
Yeah, thinking back to my teen years, most of saying yes to sex, I was 100% giving into being pestered. Yep.
Exactly, girl. So like that's what I'm saying, that when we are like focusing on kink and BDSM, we are dismissing the fact that there are serious issues here with quote unquote regular sex as well. As Irrelevant said, there's an issue with coercion and lack of understanding to consent. A lot of women, if you talk to them, if they'll talk to you about their sexual experiences, you'll understand a lot of it wasn't actually very consensual, and that without any kink involved. Okay?
Yes.
So
I think
go ahead, Julie, please.
the kinks can be more traumatizing, though, could they not?
I don't know. Let's discuss that.
Like I feel like I said
Let's discuss
earlier.
that after Irrelevant talks.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so the whole I agree with what you just said. I don't think anybody here disagrees with it. The problem is when we're talking about very specific types of kinks or sexual acts, that the consequences can be very far-reaching, including trauma and physical lasting damages. So if we have an issue of consent that we all recognize, we should look for minimizing the negative impacts of those activities by saying that there's certain sexual activities that are worse to do with the current society that we have than others. I think we all can agree that if we have issues of consent, we shouldn't be encouraging, let's say, again, beating the shit out of your partner at the same rate we should be encouraging, I don't know, missionary, right?
Okay, so this is why I think you're wrong. And not only you're wrong, you're perpetuating the exact thing that I just talked about. Because a lot of women experienced missionary, but they were actually being raped in missionary, and that traumatized them significantly. I would
it traumatize them more or less if they also got beat the shit out of?
Shut the fuck up, Wick.
More or less.
Wick, I second what Wick just said.
Yeah, more or less.
I second, but I'm laughing. I third.
If that also, they were during that experience, right, which was traumatizing,
Wick,
if they had also had someone beating the shit out of them.
Maybe they consented to missionary, but then they didn't like it, and then maybe they consented to being beaten, and then they realized they didn't like it.
Okay,
which is more traumatizing.
Do you think that if you consent to something and then you didn't like it, that means you didn't consent to it? Because that's not what consent is.
No. I'm talking about being traumatized. I'm not talking about like. I'm talking about how it would affect you after.
Okay, so let's actually have nuance about this. The point is that sexual experiences can be traumatizing and be consensual, and not be traumatizing and not be consensual. That is also a thing that happens. So it's pretty dishonest to pretend otherwise. Wick and Irrelevant. If we're going to pretend like consent doesn't exist, there's no such thing as ethical, perfect consent.
Who is pretending that?
I wasn't.
You
the
are
question...
pretending that way.
How?
Julie, I love you.
Sorry, I'll shut up. I'm sorry, honey.
Yeah, how are me?
I would say if anybody's doing that, I feel like you are, Katie, because you're saying if they consent, then it's okay. But consent isn't black and white, like you're saying to Wick right now.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that obviously people can engage in consent, like in sex or in kink, consensually. But every time I do that, people on this panel come and say, but you might actually not know that you didn't like it and you'd be traumatized, which is true. But I'm saying that happens with regular sex too. So this isn't an argument against kink. So the only argument here...
Let me explain why it is. Can I explain why it is? Maybe it'll help you.
I love that you interrupted me to make a point. Go ahead.
Okay. So the reason, right, that while yes, you are correct, normal sex and vanilla sex, right, can be traumatizing, there is it's levels of harm, right?
Yeah, I was going to say there's like a spectrum.
Yes, it's a spectrum.
Mhm.
And so while there is a harm that is risky, right, with just vanilla sex, the harm, the risk, and the potential harm goes up through the roof with certain kinks. Do you disagree?
Correct.
Well, wait, doesn't the harm go up of like intimate partner violence in monogamous relationships? Of like you should just not have monogamous relationship because you just.
I
but it's
that
all,
be-
it's all a vibe thing. It's all vibe thing. It's not based on anything, Corey. That's
If
that's
you
the-
if you never
not.
have a monogamous relationship,
I'm so
or
confused.
if we stigmatize monogamous
Relevant,
relationships,
relevant. Please take it,
then-
please.
Okay.
then we
Overlord
stop
Clive
legitimate
for
partner
200
violence.
bits. Katie muted until she could
No,
provide
let's
data.
imagine- can we
No,
imagine a
relevant.
world?
You don't get to take this because Wick asked me a question and I'd like to respond. So
Okay, yeah, go for it.
okay, thank you. Okay, so Wick, to ask a really annoying thing like if I'm raping a girl, would she be even more traumatized if I were to beat her up as I'm raping her?
Yes!
Probably
yes.
yes.
100%.
Yes!
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
1000%.
I think if you
Yes,
leave a woman
that's great.
bleeding, battered, and broken, it's going to
gonna be
be
worse.
worse
It's
than
pathetic.
just having
It's
sex
pathetic
with her.
that I said that to demonstrate that he's
Okay,
being dishonest.
first of all,
and you
first of
all
all,
were like,
I need to
yes.
address this. Gang,
But
we
it's
can't pay for
true.
mutes right now.
It's not dishonest. We all honestly agree with
It's
you.
absolutely
Chat,
true.
we can't pay for
understand,
mutes
that's
right
not
now.
my
I'm
point,
sorry.
Though. Oh my fucking god. Wick, yes, if you rape someone and then you rape her harder, she'll probably be traumatized more. Thank you for the nice imagery. However, when I said that you're pretending like
You're acting like I'm giving you the imagery here. This was your hypothetical that you painted. You have been
No.
painting the picture. You asked me to say yes or no. I said yes.
No, Wick. Okay.
This is so confusing.
So, Wick, I'm talking about being raped in missionary versus being consensually beaten up. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. And I'm fine if you say being raped in missionary might be less traumatizing than if you are beat up consensually. And if you want to be the type of guy to say that out loud, go ahead.
I can't.
am not
I'm
going to venture that type of statement because I am not like a
Wasn't
psychopath.
the whole point that they consented to it, but then it still traumatized them after because they weren't ready to engage in that type of sex? Wasn't that the whole
What are you-
point?
Yes.
Yes, it
What are-
was.
Yes.
Yes, that was.
So they thought they consented, but because they were not
What?
informed as much as they should have been,
Mm-hmm.
by the third punch, they've decided, oh no, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
wrong.
Maybe isolating
Yeah,
it
and
down
then you
to
use your safe word, right?
Through your broken teeth, maybe.
Okay. Wait.
Like,
Wait.
through your
Wait.
shattered
Wait.
maw.
Wait.
Jesus.
So it's really okay. Revoking consent is always possible, and that's a good thing. I'd argue that if you're engaging in any type of sexual behavior, that at some point you don't have a way to revoke consent, you are engaging irresponsibly in sex. And I'd argue that a lot more women get raped and harmed and traumatized. Sorry, people, not women.
I
I don't know why I'm
agree.
gendering this. People get harmed and traumatized and raped in much bigger numbers by not being able to revoke consent, not because their teeth are broken, but simply because the way we understand consent and the way that gender dynamics work make it very difficult.
I
Okay?
agree with you
So,
that in when it
that's
comes down
great.
to proportionality,
However, you
vanilla
feel-
sex
you
happens
still
way
feel
more
the
than
need-
BDSM. Yes, that's
you
true.
still feel the need to demonize consensual relationships and to say they will be harmful when any consensual relationship can be harmful. And then you're saying, well, it's harmful in an extra duper super way, and
No,
it's fine.
If a white
Then
person, no. If a white person mouths off to the cops, and a black person mouths off to the cops, which is more like first of all, there's more white people, so more white people are going to mouth off to the cops. And yes, there's a potential there, but the risk is less for them than the black person mouthing off to the cops, even though the risk is more, even though there are less black people. It's proportionality. Yes, more people are engaging in vanilla sex, so yes, consent is violated more during vanilla sex simply because it happens more.
It's
But my
proportion,
argument here is that because of the necessary, because of the mechanics of certain kinks, such as extreme BDSM, the ratio of consent being violated, even accidentally, goes up.
Wick, Do you have data to suggest that what you're
It's
saying
intuitively
is
true.
Oh, it's
Well, yeah, but
intuitive.
you're
Okay,
making
Wait,
it
can I
very difficult.
re-explain what he's saying?
Like, so using your example, like, I don't know all the data in terms of like police engagement of black people versus white people, but like if you want to say something about the kink community specifically, then you have to look at, let's say, rates of sexual assault in the kink community specifically. Unless you're gonna, as Katie said, if you have numbers to
Kink
back that up,
community
of like,
is too broad. We would need to specify it down.
It makes sense.
Isn't
We
the
would need to
problem people
specify it
introducing
down.
their
See, this is
kinks to
using
people who
data to
aren't ready for
obfuscate things, right? Because the kink community is so broad, like
well, then
light bondage is a
wait,
kink,
how are
right?
you making
But when we're
claim
talking about very
black people?
specific
How are-
things, like
how are you
beating the
making your-
shit out of someone, that is very specific. First of all, it's hard to get
Yeah,
data
Rick,
on
so
that.
it seems
How
like
are you
you're
going to
being
get data on that?
dishonest about
How are
the
you
Can I
going to...
recategorize what
Yeah,
is being
please,
said in
please try,
That's
because
a
this
different
is...
way? Okay, let's say, because I think we can all agree there is a really big problems with most normal people and how we go about giving consent and how we go about understanding consent. So let's imagine a very human hypothetical where you know that I have had these problems. You know, I have a history of it. I have a pattern of not really understanding what I want sexually, consent wise. I'm not really great at it. And, you know, you're not great at communicating it. Would you encourage violent, let's say, like, you know, BDSM, like beating the shit out of me at the same rate you would encourage, let's say, a hand job? Would you say encouraging both of these activities at the same rate makes sense? Or maybe we should err on the side of caution and go like, oh, okay, so I know you have a history of really being bad at communicating consent and things like that, and the negative ramifications of a hand job going bad is considerably less harmful than the ramifications of me knocking your teeth out.
Okay, is that directed towards me, please? Is that
Sure.
directed towards me? Hey, okay. So I think that maybe a lot of people here are not part of the kink community and they only heard stuff about it. So if you engage in a kink of like beating each other up, that is not something that you wake up in the morning, come to a random person and be like, let's beat each other up, okay? That's not how it goes. So if you're doing that, that is irresponsible and you shouldn't be engaging with that. That you can engage in kinks irresponsibly, just in the same way you can engage in sex irresponsibly. So my answer is to your question is no, because no person who knows that they have, both people have issues with setting boundaries with consent would engage in that behavior because that's irresponsible. That's the fucking point. And they shouldn't engage in hand jobs fucking either.
Yeah, but which
Okay,
one do you think is considerably worse for the outcomes? Right? For their outcomes. Which ones do you like? We can keep dialing it back to whatever you would like. We don't have to make it beating the shit out of somebody. We can even make it penetrative, like sex, like missionary versus a hand job. If I know that the person I'm talking to has issues with consent and so do I'm going to be far less likely to go for penetrative sex, especially unprotected penetrative sex, in comparison to like a hand job or like making out.
Don't you think that's an individual thing though?
I think that in this case, I brought it to an individual level, but I think you can absolutely bring it to a societal level where you can recognize that we do have societal problems with consent. And so encouraging activities that might be very difficult for people to recognize as potentially harmful would be something that we should err on the side of caution.
Okay, I hate to interrupt this.
I
I hate
meant
to
to
interrupt this,
say-
but some people need to go, and so I want to give them closing statements before they have to go and letting them shield themselves out and things like that. We're not going to end the panel. I think this is great, but I want to give an out to people who need to have an out, because consent is important. Being able to revoke the consent of being on the panel is also important. Ginger, I know that you had some issues. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I have to leave in like 9 minutes. I'll just, you know, say that I think that we're missing each other here on the ramifications of doing certain things versus doing like vanilla things. I'm not saying that it's hard because I'm in the middle here. I agree that you shouldn't push your own boundaries, but people don't understand what their own boundaries are. People have a very hard time figuring out what their boundaries are, and most of the time your boundaries are found out by situations exactly like that, where you're actually put into the situation and then you find out what your boundary is. That's the difficult part of like the BDSM situations. And when it talks about consent, it's are you informed consent, or is it just consent? That's a difference as well.
Where can people find you, Ginger?
𝕵𝖎𝖎, twitch.tv/gingerremoth, or on YouTube at the same name, or Twitter on the same name.
Check her out,
I'm gonna
gang.
stick around, but then I will just randomly
Sure, I
disappear from the
understand.
panel.
Anyone else need to give a closing? I want to respect everyone's time, so now's your chance. The window is open. No? Everyone wants to argue about this? Cool. Okay.
Consenting on arguing more.
Fair enough.
Is it informed consent? If it's a kink for me, does it make it more dangerous for you?
Yes, actually.
Oh my god, you people are...
I just do not understand what the problem is with biting certain bullets of these things are just worse for society, right? We can imagine a society where
We're talking about society now?
Yes. Yes, we are.
I thought you were talking about traumatizing individuals.
Also,
what do you think a society is made of?
Of course it is, but, you know.
It's made up of individuals, okay?
Wait,
so
I'm not going to let you get away with that. It's your guys' position is an unfounded claim as well. That we're all like feeling it out. There's no hard data that proves any of us right or wrong. Like it
depends on the specific claim.
Sure, you can talk about the idea that we're on our fifis, but so are you.
No. The point
just to be clear, I'm of the position we shouldn't kink shame. I'm kind of like on your side, but I'm not like on your side on this, because it feels like you're very, very fixed on the idea that like you're right, we're in our fifis, you guys got the data.
Let me explain it.
The numbers don't exist.
I am not right, but I'm not here on a public platform making a lot of uninformed, ignorant statements that are not supported by anything except for my
I don't think it's ignorant.
I disagree. I think
why would you fucking interrupt me, you fucking asshole? Yes.
Wait, you just said that we're making uninformed, illogical points with our fifis, and you're like, let me speak uninterrupted.
You asshole. Don't forget, she called you an asshole as well.
These aren't ignorant.
Right.
Like I want to clarify, because it's not like when I talk about I don't have data for this. I don't have scientific data. I absolutely have intuition. It's not just to reduce it to fifis.
Also, anecdotal evidence.
Anecdotal evidence, which is data. It's just not sufficient data, right? It's not scientifically sufficient data, but these are things that we can observe. These are things that we can measure. These are things that we can intuit out. We can run down these logic trains. We can run down, like, we can imagine scenarios and use hypotheticals to explore boundaries of these conditions. And my argument is that by normalizing or making it more normal than it is to beat the crap, even consensually, out of your sexual partner for sexual gratification leads to harm to society and is therefore immoral. And if someone asks you consensually to beat them up by punching them in the face till you knock their teeth out, you should say no, or you were a bad person.
You're ultimately using actually pretty much the exact same arguments, whatever, 20, 30 years ago of like legalizing same-sex marriage. It's going to result to the downfall of society. Of like if we normalize it, that pretty much just like everyone's just going to be get into same-sex marriage and everyone's just going to turn homosexual. Like that's more or less.
Sexual orientation is very different.
Same-sex marriage isn't physically harmful to
Yeah,
you. There's literally no correlation at all.
Yeah, nobody ever made the claim that like gay people will have like diseases and that they're harming each other and there's more injury with anal sex.
I didn't even think people didn't say that.
I say that they're wrong though, and that we're right. Like we can distinguish the two.
Yes, but that's the point. When I said that Wick is saying here and saying a bunch of ignorant things about their fifis, what I said was you guys think you're right, and I'm saying I can admit
yes,
that
I think beating people up causes physical harm. I'm gonna say yes. That's right. I'm right.
Very controversial.
So
does anybody have a count on how many times Katie's interrupted people? Just
so counters at 13, I think.
We're at 17 now.
17.
Wait,
sorry, 17.
You're I'm sure you were around when same-sex marriage was not legalized. So this argument
I was part of I was actually when people ask me,
like,
have you ever advocated for something? I advocated for,
that's not what I'm asking. But like, are you? So you're American. So you're probably way more aware of American culture and how it's changed over time. So like this argument of like, hey, if we normalize
what the argument was at the time, to be clear, is like if we let this happen, then they're going to be what's next? That them marrying. What's next?
Marrying
Polygamy?
animals,
marrying
like, yeah,
animals,
that's
marrying
what they
trees.
said.
That was the argument.
Right. So yeah. So we shouldn't normalize it because some sort of slippery slope, essentially down to whatever bestiality and marriage with animals. Right. That is
And
more or
map
less
stuff and stuff like that.
sure. Yeah. So from what I understand, that just at least to my understanding, if you distill your argument, that's what it boils down to.
But in this case, the
nobody here
variables
is like,
change.
we're gonna, you guys are gonna start, we're gonna start doing BSM, and then all of a sudden we're gonna start marrying dogs. Nobody's saying that.
Exactly.
You're
the
talking about some
difference
sort of
is, let me explain the
slippery
difference.
No,
Let me explain the difference, right? Is that while they were saying that this kind of behavior could possibly cause societal harm, I can point to the physical individual harm that is done to people when they get beat up. I can point to that. I can say this is a thing. This actually happens. If you punch someone in the face with force, you will knock their teeth out.
You're
It's
old
just gonna
enough to
happen.
remember the AIDS epidemic and all AIDS and HIV. So that wasn't used or weaponized as an argument at some point.
I was
I
like,
guess for
that was
couples.
the 80s. I was like 2. I don't.
I mean, we can address the STD
was
argument.
what-
The argument would only be sufficient if we couldn't get STDs from any other type of sex.
The only argument, but the only argument there was that it was the warning of use condoms regardless of whether you're having anal sex or vaginal sex.
So, right. So practice it safely.
They absolutely were right to stigmatize unprotected sex during the AIDS epidemics. That was a good thing that they did.
And encouraging healthy practices.
Yeah, such as, again, using condoms, etc., etc.
Right.
I know that you're trying to connect the two, but you're really not going to in most of our
No,
minds.
no, I am.
No, of course not.
I think sexual orientation
I'm
and
not
like
sure I'm feeling the
kinks are like
connection either.
very clearly distinguishable. Like the sex or sexes that a person is attracted to is like very clearly distinguishable from the sex acts that a person enjoys participating in. Like we would not call a man exclusively attracted to other men. We would not say this is a guy with a man kink. Like that, we can just clearly distinguish between sexual orientation and like sexual preferences, which I know is used as a homophobic dog whistle. People would say, oh, his sexual preference for members of the same sex exclusively. But I think we can just clearly distinguish sex or sexes versus sex acts.
But that's not Wick's argument, at least from what I understand. That's not his argument.
My argument, let me repeat it so we are clear, right, is that the individual harm that is done, much like Irrelevant said, we have problems with consent. People don't know what they're consenting to. People don't understand it. They don't understand the concept. So the potential harms of someone engaging in consensual sadism and masochism, right, to after a certain point, right, to a certain degree, becomes immoral. That you can no longer morally either consent to it or consent to doing it to another person. And that line, to be clear, which I have, again, said earlier when Katie asked me what my line is when there's a high enough potential risk for permanent physical injury.
Right, and I attempted to gauge that with the finger, whatever, cutting off the finger.
Yes, cutting off the finger is immoral in every circumstance.
Right now, but you're open to it being
Yeah,
permissible.
If
I have a
the variables
question.
change, my answer changes. So if we can grow fingers and grow regenerative powers by gene editing, okay, sure.
Like, is rape sometimes moral?
No.
Because it doesn't cause like everlasting damage?
I think it does.
It definitely causes everlasting
The
damage.
I think you have to live with it for the
even
rest
in the
of
case,
forever, and it
no, let me
sucks.
engage with this. Let me engage with this.
Okay.
Because again, it was the potential for harm. And when you engage in rape, the potential for harm, even if it doesn't actually end up causing harm, is so great and so high that we say no.
It's just missionary rape.
Trauma, mental harm is still physical harm.
Wait. I can engage. What if they're asleep?
No, it would still, when you find out when you wake up, it's still traumatizing.
Yeah, the potential of someone finding out.
No, what if you don't find out?
You don't know that you're.
Yeah, we don't live in a
This
world
is
where
a
we.
completely different conversation.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
to be clear, I've had this conversation like 9 different times. It's completely different.
On this topic, thank you so much for having me, Wick. It was
Ginger,
a pleasure,
it's all a
everybody.
pleasure,
Thank you so much.
Go follow her again. Can one of my mods shout Ginger Moth out in chat?
follow right now.
Go follow.
Take care. Be well.
Okay.
Because you are making you appear to be making, at least in my mind, like a utilitarian argument, especially like when you use words like, I think permanent damage or permanent long-term damage, and so like I understand what you mean, but that's difficult to quantify, and so it's like, well, as I think Katie is trying to highlight, what if there is no quantifiable permanent harm or damage, like in someone who's sexually assaulted, or rather, how you can make the argument for like don't sexually assault someone who's asleep.
Because we live in a world where we can never know for 100% certain that this person will never find out, never discover it, never see this. And because we know this is true, because we know that it's unclear, we don't live in sci-fi world, we live in real world, we can say that this engagement on that grounds, utilitarian grounds, is wrong. I would also argue it on a moral kind of ground as well, that you should not violate someone's consent. I think that is wrong. Violations of consent are not okay.
Right. So like a widespread, let's say, lack of respect for consent is harmful.
Yes.
So
Widespread lack of consent is harmful.
So it's not tied to the body per se, right?
I mean,
it's the concept.
But both are true. Both are true.
I think it's both, yeah.
Yeah, it's both, right? It's not an either or thing. It's both.
Wick, I'd like to...
Because if you take the consent out, just to address Corey real quick, if you take the consent out of it and the consent's no longer a problem, I still have an issue with it, because I still have an issue with someone who is consenting or has consented to do physical something that would has a potential for a high enough physical, lasting, permanent harm. Even if there's consent there, I still think it's immoral.
Yeah, that would be the disconnect of because I think you can consent to some amount of pretty much.
No, I also agree that you can
I'd like
consent to some. Right? To some is okay to consent to. So getting a tattoo, or even if it's a really bad tattoo, right? Like
transitioning with?
Again, that's something you can consent to. And I think that
why can you consent to transitioning, but you can't consent to like getting amputated?
Because one is a medical condition that can be cured through transition, or at least that's the theory, right? And the other isn't.
Okay. Can I engage with your point?
Please.
Thank you. So if we had data, which you don't, that per capita, more people are harmed and traumatized and vanilla raped, because that's a term we're using now, in outside of the kink community, would you change your really ignorant views about that? Because like if I'm okay, so if let's build the bridge, right? If I say you should not in fact engage in a kink of beating each other up if you are not actually done the proper work that the BDSM community is going to teach you to engage in that kink responsibly. So I'd argue that people who have certain issues should not engage in certain behaviors for their own well-being. So I'm building the bridge with you when I'm saying you shouldn't engage in kink that is dangerous, if that's what you want to say. But here's the thing. You shouldn't engage in sex either then. Let's make the destiny argument.
I don't know the destiny argument well enough to make that, but I will make... Right,
You
this
shouldn't
idea
have sex
that
if you
there are
can't
certain
set
kinks.
boundaries, right?
My position, to be clear, is there are certain kinks that you cannot, that there is no moral way or responsible way to engage in them. And one of those...
You're doing the thing again when you're not addressing my point, that you're pretending like you care about harm of people, but whenever I tell you most harm is done with vanilla cases, you're just like, you don't care about that.
No, I do care.
Wait, because you just want to kink shame. That's literally the point. That's all you want to do. You just want to demonize a thing that you don't understand anything about and that you're not part of the community, instead of actually engaging with harm. If you cared about harm, responsible sexual engagement would solve both kink problems.
If I cared about harm, I would leave the panel. Oh my god, the mental trauma. Go ahead.
Wait, can I say something?
Please.
Is the reason why you're saying that harm happens more in vanilla sex is because vanilla sex happens more often?
Yeah,
Yes.
he's already conceded a quantitatively more. He's arguing a
No,
proportion
I'm saying
thing.
if I presented, if we had per capita evidence, would that matter to Wick? I think not.
That's fair.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
We can't.
Do you have it? I'm willing to be wrong on this if you have this data.
Okay.
Can I help Katie out a little bit here?
I like that you're
When it comes to
asking
like
for
more
permission.
vanilla
I'm like,
sex, there's a
what the fuck?
significant harm for like pregnancy and stuff like that, and that can cause a severe problem for the individuals that might be potentially raped or something like that, because you might have to either carry a child to term that was the product of a rape, or like go through an abortion, which can be extremely traumatizing, which may not be the case in like certain kink activities.
The harms can be different. You can have different harms. I don't know how to measure, and this might be my ignorance here, but I don't know how to measure the harm of an unwanted pregnancy versus the harm of having your skull fractured. I don't know how to measure that.
Yeah,
Right? I think it's going to be person to person.
Maybe
Yeah.
we're not
I'm
meant
sorry
to
to
be
jump
measuring
in.
that.
I
and you're
literally
trying to measure that as a
got out
problem.
of bed because of this fucking panel.
I
Some of the
know,
shit in
right?
here is
Feel it.
fucking insane. I'm like,
Feel it.
Wick, you motherfucker. We discussed this on Twitter because you were like, oh, I don't know if I do this. And I was like, no, don't do this. It's past Pride Month. We do this every fucking year and you missed your chance. And here we are right now having a fucking conversation I told you not to have unless you got everyone on the panel to admit what their fucking kinks were, you goddamn motherfucking
So
coward.
should we go
Now,
one at a time?
Right. Okay. Holy shit. Fucking firstly. To the point about gaming data, that doesn't support Katie's point. The point is that things we absorb as media obviously affect us. We have really, really good data that pornography affects the way we act, and we can see it in youth. The fact that they like basically will undertake sexual acts and then it will like have an impact on how they see relationships. And secondly, like, from the whole like consent thing around like rape and everything else, you can't consent to something as a kink that you're not like involved in. That's not how kinks work. That's just rape. You can't be like, oh, it would be like a nice fantasy to get robbed, but then like kind of plan a robbery versus it happening to you accidentally. These don't really line up. I'm not sure where we are with this. And as for like, and just quickly with snuff films and going to like the extremes of like violent pornography, we criminalize those things because we understand that there's an implicit harm in making them. This is also why we're really against child pornography, because like you can't consume ethically video child pornography because there is an implicit harm in its creation. So like it's not, it doesn't like line up with the same things. This is also the argument for things like baby furs, for example, in the community, in the furry community. Often those images are taken and traced around actual toddlers. So like you're taking an image of a toddler and turning it into a fursona as a kink. We understand that there is an implicit harm to doing that to somebody without their consent because a child can't consent. Okay, right. I feel much better now.
I want to pose. Okay, I don't know if you heard me talking about. Her name is Sharon 𝕵𝖎𝖏. She genuinely consented to her own murder in writing, graphically described how she wanted to be murdered, was murdered in that exact way. Okay, in writing. If this had hypothetically been filmed, and if before you saw the murder, the emails of her enthusiastically consenting, like came up, would that be fine?
No, because like again, somebody undertaking that is like clearly mentally ill. Like in the same way that we don't we don't allow mentally ill people to consent to things that harm them. And
what about BDSM?
Yes.
No, Beckett. No, I want to ask this to Beckett. Beckett.
Yeah. What about BDSM?
Beckett, someone who loves to get the shit beat out of them. Can they
but this
consent?
is why this is
Are they
this is
mentally
why
ill?
actually. This is why, actually, when we look at something like Grey's Anatomy, Grey's Anatomy, like whatever the fuck, 50 Shades of Grey, there we go. One of the constant criticisms
both
of
bad.
50 Shades of Grey is that he's not a good dom. There is
No,
like
he's
an
not.
implicit relationship of taking care of a sub that like you understand that there's like a second part of that. We don't just allow people to be like completely masochistic with themselves because we understand that as a form of self-harm rather than actual gratification. And anyone who knows anything about BDSM knows that it's like a difference between just being violently beaten up versus like having things done to you under consent that you enjoy. Some people like being kicked in the balls, but like again, there's like they don't like we're not suggesting like, well, just put your balls in a vice, right? There are different levels of harm there.
Beckett, just to very quickly, what's your stance on the right to suicide and assisted suicide? Just very quickly.
I think people have the right to like not. I think it's fine to put yourself in a like to have assisted suicide and be suicidal if you're in a condition where you can't recover from it. So if you are terminally ill or have something where you are going to die in quite a horrific manner, like your death is going to be prolonged and painful, then obviously...
Okay, so you're not fine with suicide for whatever reason.
Yeah, I'm like, if somebody's really depressed, but we can like treat those things, obviously we should treat those things. That's why Canada's policy on just letting like mentally ill people get like, put forward for like assisted suicide is obviously immoral.
Okay, so that would make
obviously,
sense
but
with
okay.
your snuff thing.
Okay,
that
sure.
tracks.
Like we can disagree on the ethics there, Corey, but like, yeah, that's my position.
It's not that easy to get made into Canada. It's not that easy.
Yeah, no, I know it's more complicated. I'm just using it as an example because it's
as a Canadian, let me run some defense here.
Yeah, no, you're
not that
fine,
easy.
you're fine. Listen, I'm mostly here because Wick needs a token ginger and the other one left.
True.
Let's be honest.
True. I mean, look, I'm trying to. Some people have. Is ginger a kink? Is that a kink to like gingers?
Fetish?
Apparently, if it's a
That's just
kink,
good
you're
taste.
in more danger because
I think
that's
it's
how
a
that
fetish,
works
not a
now.
kink.
That's a preference, I'd assume.
What
what's
if,
the
We all just
what
agree
if
it's
he's,
good for our
what if
friends.
he's
Well, Wick is getting
fetishizing
off
it?
right now, I'm sure.
What's the difference
What if he's
between a preference and a
fetishizing him?
kink?
What if it's like race play with gingers? Is that okay? Kinks are dangerous.
Well, it depends on the kink. Like
I don't think all
I
kinks
started
are
this. I
dangerous.
started
Yeah,
this
not all
talking
kinks
about
are dangerous.
Relly's mustache and how like hot Relly's mustache was. Like that's not the same as like necessarily taking a person and like just denigrating everything about them, but you can find things attractive about people and you can have certain attractions to things. And I wouldn't even necessarily say that.
Beckett, can you sexualize irrelevant in a way that you would find, as an example, can you sexualize irrelevant in a way that you would say is inappropriate?
Well, ask Irrelevant first if they're okay with that.
Relly, the first time we fucking met, do you consent to me sexualizing
I do
you?
consent. Yeah, I heard you're a pretty cool person, so I consent.
Well, I think it
Can I
would
go
be inappropriate to like on the
Going
first time of
next?
Relly just being like,
We all
"Oh,
gotta take
cool.
turns?
He's,
Like
he's a bit of buff, isn't he? He's a bit of buff, isn't he? Like, I'd love to get him down, get him down, take some pictures, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You know, like proper
Gang,
British.
gang.
Pics.
Yeah,
He said pics.
yeah, holiday pics, holiday snaps.
I do
Relly,
need
you like
somebody to help
holiday
me with my
snaps,
pictures,
yeah?
Can I go next? Relic, do you consent?
Yeah, sure.
I want this to be
Okay.
inappropriate ways, okay?
Inappropriate ways. Okay, I know how to do this. You remember that time when we were on call together and we made sexual noises to each other? That was hot. I come off to that every night. There you go.
Okay, I want extra context for what this was.
you're not allowed. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to give any extra context to that.
You did a great job.
Yo,
Kate.
I didn't tell you to destroy his whole career. This man. Oh man, clip that, gang. Clip that and send it around. Okay. Anyway, go ahead. But we are kind of getting on these weird tracks, and this is the reason this topic is interesting to me is because there's so many ways to engage with it. And so many, as Irrelevant said, so everyone has different lines, and I think we all have different lines. I'm trying to find yours, Katie, but it's hard for me to find yours because and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm getting from you is that as long as both parties consent, everything is okay.
Yeah, I believe in autonomy. So yeah.
Wait, I forget. Did you agree with death, like murder?
Yeah,
if it's
no, she said
done
the
in a
consensual
certain
snuff
way, yeah.
film was fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know how to engage with that. I think that's just...
Okay, I've got a question.
Please.
If somebody wants to make pornography that's like incest pornography, they're above the age of consent. Let's say, like, I don't know. Let's say Ben
Oh,
Thorpe and
incest
Grace
is a
made
good
an incest
example.
porn or something. Would that be like?
Wait, how is incest a good example? I'm sorry to interrupt, but how is good an example?
Wincest. No, I'm kidding. I'm talking.
It's okay. It's okay. Because you asked me about my line. So in terms of incest, and this is what I'm saying that like people can do. I'm not particularly interested. Siblings is whatever to me. Even the only thing that I'm not okay with incest is parents who have raised their children. So even if they're above the age of consent, if they raise them, then that would like.
Is this turning into an incest debate?
What about
no?
twins?
But I'm gonna finish my
What about
point.
twins?
No.
So my only line is incest where the parents have raised the children.
What if it's like what if
about
it's like
conjoined
way in
twins
the
that
future?
share
So
the same
this person, so this person's 41. Okay, this one of them's 41. The kid in this situation is 41, and the adult's 61. Let's say, right? So they've been out of the house since they were 18, right?
Did
they've
they raise
lived-
them? Then no.
Okay,
Wait,
so
there
no
was
matter how much
another.
time has
Okay,
passed?
another little true crime story. This actually happened. I don't know her name, but she was adopted. She met her biological father above the age of consent, had never met him before, and they got married illegally.
Yes.
That's fine.
So it actually happens a lot that like people who didn't grow up with their with their biological parents, they actually end up being attracted to those parents and they end up coupling up. It's a known psychological phenomena, because the way that we learn to be disgusted by family members is through living with them and through have a joint experience. That's why I specifically said that my line is growing with them, because it is a known psychological phenomena that siblings that meet after the age of consent, or parents who meet children that they've never met in their life before, they end up coupling up because they actually end up bonding in a really weird dystopian way. But yeah, so that's why my line is when they raise them, because I would consider that grooming. The child cannot be implicated in that, even if they are now an adult. So that's my line.
Yeah, there's still that power dynamic. Depending.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Beckett, did you have a response to that? I know I interrupted you, but I'm curious.
Well, firstly, I mean, it's like, fucking hell. I mean, obviously, there's an implicit thing with like family members that it's like a violation of trust, right? So, like, Katie's right there, but it's also like, yeah, even if you're meeting a parent later in life or a sibling, like, firstly, there's the obvious ones with relationships that you have a higher risk of genetic defects, like much higher.
Yeah, I don't do genetics, so eugenics. Okay. Sorry, so I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, okay, fine, sure, fine, sure, whatever. But I'd say that obviously, like, we're not just talking about relationship here; we're talking about the kink of it. So there is a fair amount of like incest porn as a kink, and obviously a lot of that is actors, right? The vast majority. In fact, Pornhub stated that the vast majority of their actors are not siblings or step siblings, because they can't confirm that all of them aren't. But if somebody's like fucking their sister on camera for money, because people get off on that and get off on it being real, is that an unethical kink? Because there's no relationship bound there. There's no like, there's no love. There's just like, we're going to make a lot of money from fucking each other for strangers' approval. So the production of that. Yeah.
Oh, so again, consent isn't about love. So people can consent, sex work is work. So yeah, I don't care.
But don't you see how this can create this kind of like a weird, perverse incentive situation, right?
Yes, Wick, I'm an anti-capitalist, so I'm aware that markets can create negative incentives that harm people. If you want to go down that route, sure, go ahead. I don't think that's the discussion, though.
I think it's absolutely part of the kink discussion, because that's one of the arguments against extreme.
It's you pretending like it is because you have a specific kink against kinks.
I do not. I think most kinks are fine. The things that I think are unethical are the ones that cause harm, and my argument here is by normalizing this and especially with consumption of porn added into it on top of it, right? Creating a market for it. It is.
Wick, there's a market for porn, right?
But the market for vanilla porn is much different than the market for rape porn.
Don't you want a free market? Don't you like advocate?
If you think I'm okay with unregulated markets, you're wrong. I like regulated markets.
Right.
That's still capitalism.
So which markets? So I mean, this is going to
all markets should be regulated to a certain extent.
He wants to ethically regulate the markets that his fifis are heard about.
Yeah. So which markets should be regulated or not regulated?
All markets should have some regulation to some extent. What those regulations are and look like vary upon market to market, and I don't want to go through every single market, because a lot of them I don't know. I'm not educated enough on that market to know what the best types
So-
of regulations are. But when it comes to pornography, okay,
Yeah.
there is absolutely very good reasons to regulate that market in certain ways. And one of the things.
So you think we should regulate porn because porn
Yes,
creates a
yes.
perverse.
Does
Okay,
anyone
when you say
disagree? Does
regulate-
anyone think we shouldn't regulate porn here? Raise your hand.
Everyone agrees that we should. We already disagreed on the
Yes.
idea of snuff porn being made and child porn being made.
Yes.
We all agree.
Okay, so when we're saying regulate, now let's get to when you say regulate, what you mean is I only decide some stuff are okay and some stuff are not. And what I'm saying, porn in itself, the industry, as in any industry under capitalism, creates certain incentives that can be done harmfully. So unless you're going to explain to me why some porn production is okay and some isn't, which you are going
is
to. You're going
easy.
to say some types of porn are harmful to society because they make more people like a thing. And I'm going to say, okay, good for you. That's a dumb
Yeah, but
argument. I don't
some
want to
form
argue
of porn, some form of porn is more harmful to individuals, and some form of porn is more harmful to the people involved in its production. That's kind of the point. Like, it's like we could all sit here and go, well, some industries are more harmful, but those are the ones we regulate harder. Like when we've got like a dangerous industry, the regulation for that industry is tighter. And when we've got an industry that might affect more people, let's say food production, for example, the regulations are tighter because we understand that there are implicit harms to these things. If you're talking about like pornography, yes, obviously we want to regulate things that like to stop the incentivization to do harmful things, because like we recognize that you may have an incentive to make a lot of money doing this. This is one of the reasons we regulate prostitution, because you could make a lot of money doing it, but we want to incentivize people away from it. That's one of the reasons it's illegal.
Yeah, Beckett, I'm not arguing with that. I'm arguing with people's lines because some people say, Wick has run many a panel where people say that the act of engaging in porn, any porn, is harmful and traumatizing and bad. It doesn't
If you
matter.
wanna argue with those people, I can bring them on.
Let me finish. I hate you. So
Love turned to hate, right, in real time.
no, I just hate him now.
So sweet.
Beckett. So my issue is not. It's fine that everyone uses the same arguments. What I care about is the line that people draw and why they draw it and whether it makes sense or not. And most of the way that people talk about their lines is just like, I intuitively feel this way, and this is what society around me told me, and I didn't actually put any effort or time thinking about this in a more comprehensive manner. And if I hear about something that makes me feel uncomfortable, then I'll just change my line because my ethics don't actually mean anything to me.
Do you
know,
think I have
just
not
did a
spent
Wick
any
impression.
time thinking about this, that I'm just willy-nilly pulling stuff out of my ass on this? Or do you think that I have considered this position, I've thought about this position, I've done some research on this position, and I've come to my conclusion through logic,
Okay.
reason, and intuition, all three together?
I think that if you're willing to acknowledge that you have just a conceived bias against kinks because you have some sort of shame around sex, then I'll agree that you've thought about it and you're just being guided by your irrational bias,
Okay, so
which is
let's-
okay. You can do that.
let's
People
look
do
at
that
some
all
of
the
the-
time. Just
let's
admit
look
that. That would be easier.
Let's look at some of the criminal data then. So overwhelmingly, people who are rapists have at some point engaged in rape porn, like the consumption of rape porn. This is something we find constantly. It's very, and usually people who commit violent sexual crimes have an accompanying porn addiction. And these are kind of like quite good indicators, in the same way that like people who often have drug problems will engage in other forms of crime because it like there are links between these things, whether they are like social, structural, or psychological. So if you want to look at like pornography from an ethical point of view, like, yeah, we segment out what kind of pornography seems to be like less harmful. Like obviously forms of like pornography that you could make arguments that pornography that's inclusive, for example, or feminist. So if you've got pornography that's interracial couples, you could make the rainbow capitalism argument that this is more inclusive forms of pornography, as opposed to like, I don't know, a fucking German rape video. Like, and like, there are obviously going to be things there that different people are going to react to in different ways. But by and large, there are different groups that are going to consume certain types of pornography. So, okay, actually, let's look at the like violent rape pornography.
Wait.
It's like just like a subsection quickly. who do you think is the largest consumer of violent rape pornography? Because we have the data for this.
Okay, wait, before
No,
anyone
it's
goes
middle-class
on,
liberal women.
Really?
Before
Yes.
anyone goes on, I'm gonna pop out of this. I need to go get food.
Okay.
But thanks for having me on, Wick. This was
Where can
really
people
great.
find you?
Thanks for hanging out, everyone. I need to get out of here and eat.
Yeah, where can people find? We're gonna end this because I need to eat soon. But where can people find you?
Sad Kit Kat online, but I'm annoying, so do that if you wish. But
Gang,
She's
check
not
her out.
annoying.
She's not annoying. She's great. Thank you for coming on the panel. Thank you for putting up with us. That was beautiful.
no, you guys are great. I'm just hungry.
Nice meeting you.
No, that's awesome.
Take care. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
But I want you to finish your point, then we're gonna kind of close it out because I want to go get some chicken nuggies.
So middle-aged liberal women.
Middle class liberal women.
Okay.
The highest indicators of violent pornography, because it seems to be that, like, generally the type of men they select for are much more progressive, much more liberal, usually much more like conservative men. And it seems to be like there seems to be a correlation there that they select for pornography that they're not getting in their normal sex lives, is the general theory. But my point is that there are links between certain types of porn. And if we can understand what those links are and who is consuming them and why in different genders, we can look at like how we're regulating those things to do the least amount of harm. Does that make sense? Because it's not just like feel bad.
It does make sense. I don't think it's like a foolproof plan. Because I don't know how much of the panel you've seen, but like I think Wick might have a problem with super violent like rape porn.
I do.
Yeah, he does. But it seems that if we're talking about media influencing people, unless we're saying that these middle class liberal women are going to go out and start raping people, it just doesn't really follow to what Wick was trying to say, or really anything that Wick says or has ever said on this panel, because Wick has failed to make a single good argument.
Also, like, go ahead. Well, yeah.
Well, everyone's
like,
gonna get a
go with your
closing
point.
statement soon but I am really hungry. But to address that before right, we end this, because I am going to end this because I'm hungry. Okay, again, just because most people, right, consume a thing and they're fine. If there is a significant portion, significant minority who consume it and it causes, or there is a risk that it can cause certain behaviors, and absolutely we should regulate that. $2 from Testicle Johnson. Do not look up Charizarding on Urban Dictionary. Do
I'm
not
on my
do
way.
it. Okay, fair enough.
Do you
have
data for that, Wick?
I can say, right, intuitively, that we know. I have data. I have data that media influences people. And because I know media influence people, I can make some inferences from that data, right? To say that
no, you actually can't, Wick.
You can absolutely make inferences from data sets. That's how science works. We use data. Data doesn't actually tell us anything. The whole thing about data is we make inferences from that data.
I'm sorry that I inflamed you. I forgot I should be ignoring you because you're just silly.
I am a silly goose. Okay, gang. Thank you for coming to the show. If you like what I have to say, right? If you like these kind of panels, incentivize me to do so by giving me money. Super chats are great. Like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this on Kick, you can follow the channel there. You can sub to me there. I'm monetized on Kick. If you're watching this on Twitch, you can sub to me there. Throw some bits my way. Follow the channel. It's great. Take some clips. Post them to your friends. This has been fun. I want to give everyone an outro. Tell people where they can find you. Your closing thoughts. We're going to start in the reverse order. Rora, close us up.
Well, my closing thoughts. I always come to panels because I like kind of, learning and discussing things. And I do believe Corey changed my perspective with the alcoholism point. I think that was very excellent, and I related it to my own weight loss advice. I do believe, though, that I'm kind of on the side of Wick a bit, where I do believe there could be some harm reduction involved with that. Well, there's no proof, though. I get that. There's no proof, though. But I do believe erring on the side of caution. It's being made with well intention. And I don't even know if that's necessarily shaming either. But anyways, you can find me on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and everywhere else is Rora Pickles. And on Twitch, I am just Rora, Rora. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was nice.
Thanks for coming by. Always a pleasure. It was really fun. And thank you. Next up, Katie, go ahead.
I want to apologize to the panel I don't have a dynamic with some of you. I know I get very playful with Corey and Wick and Julie, but I know that for people who don't know me and I don't have that dynamic with, that can come off like pretty rude. I don't intend it to be that way. That is not, however, a condemnation of being playful with your friends. That is condemnation of people like myself not properly enforcing, not properly respecting other people in a good manner. So that is an analogy for how consent is the key component to this conversation, not kinks. Wick is wrong, very wrong about everything. Rora, I'm really happy that Corey changed your mind. Irrelevant, I can't wait for our VC where we make more noises to each other.
I can't wait either.
Okay.
Gang, check her out. Even though she hates me, we give a voice to people no matter how wrong they are, and we allow and platform even harmful views such as Katie has. That's okay. Next up, Corey Campbell.
Yeah, first, thank you so much for having me and inviting me. It was super enjoyable and also entertaining for a variety of reasons. One, because I got to engage, and also I got to observe all of the engagement that occurred, which is highly entertaining. And I'm glad that I was able to introduce some nuance into the, or at least attempt to introduce some nuance into the conversation. And like, yeah, what I posted just in the VC chat now is, I think, a nice paper where I'm pretty consistent across panels, where past panels and fat shaming, I'm pretty much generally against shaming, like, overall. It has a very niche use, and overall, not a useful tool to motivate behavior change. And that bears out also in my position on fat shaming. And that's what part of the research that I posted in the VC chat. Where I think most people don't understand their own motivations for change, and they just do a sort of a post hoc rationalization of like, oh, shame worked for me, and therefore good for everybody. But actually, if they actually, I think, do some soul searching, shame did not actually work for them. There are other underlying reasons as to why they're motivated to change. All that being said, again, thank you so much for having me. And as, let's say, a reward for anybody tuning in, so to Beckett, what Beckett brought up earlier, like everyone should be put out what their kinks are. I'm going to out Wick's kink now because I actually know what it is. And Wick's kink is actually being called a mentor. He loves that. That is his favorite. And the more people that call Wick a mentor,
call back to yesterday's show. Okay,
that is his absolute
call back to yesterday's show.
favorite. That is his absolute favorite kink, and I know he loves it and gets off on it. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I was on VC with my boyfriend last night and we were talking and I randomly burst out laughing because I remember Kidology calling Wick a mentor. And I just started laughing because it just like flashed in my head. It was hilarious.
Well, I'm glad I'm glad it amused you. $5 from Aaron M. Sound. Wick is fair. It's true. Relevant.
Well, last thing I'll say. Yeah, so yeah, you can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv /𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. I'm a PhD candidate in biochemistry. I cover science, news, and research. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. It's Corey Campbell. And yeah, thank you so much, Wick. Super grateful to be on, as always.
Oh,
he does workout streams too. There's lots of butt stuff.
Check him out.
True. Very true.
Irrelevant. Go ahead.
All right. First off, I want to double check with Beckett. You said it was white, liberal, middle-class women that were the most engaged with violent pornography?
That was like, to be fair, that was the data from like Pornhub's own, like they did. Like,
okay.
In like 20, I think it's like the 2018, 2019 data. They did these big maps where they did like everyone's like demographic stuff.
Okay. I just wanted to see if you had it or whatever, but I actually remember what you were talking about, so I don't need it anymore. But my closing statement on this is going to be, I'm actually of the side that we probably shouldn't be shaming people for their kinks, and the reason why it's kind of similar to what Corey was getting at. I don't think shaming actually does much to change any of these actions, nor do I believe I have sufficient information to like say that you shouldn't be doing this. It's just that like I think we should err on the side of caution. Or I don't think I have sufficient information to call it morally bad. I think we should err on the side of caution. Like if I was sexually interacting with somebody and they told me to beat the shit out of them, I just wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. I don't know, because that's not really something I want to do. But it's also something that like, if they are not properly like doing all of the introspection and like whatever shit, that can go really, really bad. And I don't want to be a part of it. I personally don't want to be a part of it. I don't think many people have sufficient information about themselves to be able to be participating in those more extreme situations, the lesser situations and stuff like that. Yeah, there's plenty of them that are perfectly, in my opinion, fine and not that crazy or anything like that. So that's my position. I'm against kink shaming. But yeah, you may not have been able to tell based on a lot of the arguments I was making, and I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, like,
Of course.
not even last minute, literally in the middle.
You
of
were
the
molding. I had to. I was like, okay,
Thank
fine.
you. Thank you for having me.
You pestered me
in
into
the
it,
middle of
right?
it.
No, it was a pleasure. Hopefully next time you don't have to pester me. I don't have to pester you. I can just invite you and you'll come on. That's fine. $10 from 𝕵𝖎𝖙. I'd love to super chat you, but I'm saving for a down payment on a home. Oh, well, thank you for the $10 anyway. Allison, go ahead.
Okay, so kind of just to repeat my opening statement, I said there are some sexual proclivities that are either objectively harmful to the self or others. I gave the example of knife play and asphyxophilia, when people enjoy masturbating with a noose around their neck. That leads to a number of deaths every year. That's bad. And I did appreciate the difference between guilt and shame. I thought that was insightful and good. I still think if you're desperately trying to get somebody help and guilt as to the action is not working, like, last-ditch effort, like, if they end up feeling bad about themselves, if they end up feeling defective, if you will, like, it's not the worst thing in the world. I didn't like Planned Parenthood's tweet because I think it encouraged people to police their own responses to, in the moment being asked to do certain things that they would find degrading or debased. And yeah, that's kind of just how I feel. And you cannot find me. I am a Discord random.
The WhickTV exclusive, gang. Thank you for being here, Allison. Thanks for.
But you're so pretty. You should stream or something.
Don't encourage her to that degeneracy. It will do her harm. Okay.
Yeah, we can't do that. Streaming society wide.
Yeah.
That's
$5 from
Okay,
Purple
so-
Political Breakdown. I wasn't there the entire convo, but we need more shame. Shame is good. Okay. Finish your thought, then Beckett has to brief intro from
Yeah,
Beckett.
I was just gonna say, since some kinks are harmful, there are men out there with kinks to give pretty ladies money. So if you are lacking in money or just like compliments, this might be the career for you.
I appreciate that. I really do. That's
Also-
nice.
I have thoughts on that, but I want to end the panel on sometimes. That's just
You
spark
are a
another
very
argument. It's going to
tricky
spark
lady,
another
Wick,
argument because I'm
okay?
like, wow, this is a great example of what we shouldn't be normalizing, right? Like people doing harm for themselves
I know.
for
You
money.
hate it when people like exist. I understand.
It's not hating
It
people
bothers
as they exist. It's hating we incentivize people who do self-harm in order to get money. And I think
So streaming is self-harm or just
in a
when you're
way,
being
yes.
woman with-
Obviously,
Okay,
streaming is
thank you.
self-harm. Have you seen the state of this
Yeah.
fucking?
Yeah, have you met streamers? Have you met
Yeah,
them? Like most of them have some kind of
Okay, Wick.
$10 from Aaron M. Sound. I was here the whole
think-
time. We need
I
less shame and
think
more self-love.
It is.
Does Irrelevant enjoy
unethical.
sensuality? That's a question. Do you enjoy sensuality?
Sensuality?
Sensuality, yes.
Yeah, of
Bucks
course.
to ask that question. So yes, the
Yeah,
answer is yes.
absolutely. That shit bangs.
Okay, Beckett, go ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks. Sorry for the wall of text that are our DMs. I don't think I ever DM you during panels, but this one was the exception. It's literally all in caps, and it's been going for about 2 hours. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I've got no closing statement other than the fact that my chat's kink is rating attractive streamers, and tonight our relevant one, everyone agrees, and this is a direct quote. That man should fuck. So, yeah,
Hey.
Consensually.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. And yeah, that's pretty much
Okay.
it. Oh, Beckett Krabs. You can find me Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, all that kind of crap.
Beautiful.
Wick,
What?
you're a hypocrite because you're the one who says that people should engage in self-harm. So I say people are allowed to self-harm if they want, but you're actually the one who says we should restrict those behaviors. So it seems like you need to stop streaming because you are harming yourself. You just admitted it.
I was
We are
being a little
revoking.
facetious about the streaming thing. That wasn't
We
entirely
as a
serious.
panel. We as a panel revoke your agency because you do not deserve to make your own autonomous decisions as an adult. You are self-harming, and please stop streaming. Thank you.
Again, I was being facetious. It was mostly a
No,
joke.
stop streaming.
Actually, I'm gonna advocate for Wick streaming because otherwise he can't mentor otherwise.
Noted. How am I gonna be a mentor if I can't stream? We're gonna write out. Are any of you gonna continue to stream after this?
Yeah.
I'm streaming.
And I might be going over some kink stuff anyway.
We raided you last time, Katie. We'll raid Beckett.
Raid Beckett, I don't care.
I'm not even streaming. You just got me in here, man. It's too interesting. I had to do it. I'm sorry.
True. Maybe you know what? I almost asked you to invite Darius too, but that would have been
Yeah.
maybe a little too much.
That would've been a lot.
Yeah, okay, gang. What we got? Tomorrow we're gonna have Counterpoints on and Pixie on as well to talk about Counterpoints tweet about how you should marry a woman who has a good family. A lot of people were really bad about that. And
Well, that's his kink.
that was the joke I made as well, right? But yeah, a lot of people were really mad about that, and so yeah, tomorrow 6 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully it goes through. Okay, see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, on YouTube gang, we're going to go towards. We're gonna edit this.
Hey, thank you for the raid, Wick. I appreciate that. That's very good.
Fuck you, Wick.
I love you. Bye.
Yeah, I gotta walk my dog.
Yeah,
Bye,
have
guys. It's fun.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, you're gonna go eat, Wick. Is that you?
Yeah, I'm trying to do this where I'm
See?
ending and going to Prime Kai. Okay.